All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we're going to be diving into satanic cults and ritual abuse. Now, I know that we are during Lent. This is sort of an off-topic stream, but it's a stream that I've been wanting to do really before Lent. As you guys know, I've been super busy with finishing the dissertation. So now I got a whole queue of streams that I'd like to do. And today we're going to be diving into a topic that came up from a conversation I was having with somebody, and they thought it was a little bit far-fetched when I was bringing up potential satanic links and ritual abuse regarding things that have been occurring in culture, especially within the last, 4 or 5 years. And so they thought it was kind of echoing the satanic panic. And we're going to be introducing this topic to you guys today. The satanic panic is a term used to describe sort of what is deemed the hysteria around Satanism or satanic ritual abuse that occurred between the 1980s and 1990s. And there's a handful of cases that dealt with the abuse of children. And because police officers that investigated these crimes claimed that they were linked to potential satanic cults, allegedly, some of these people actually got off on their convictions or got released from prison. And so it's sort of common motif. And I've told you guys before, when I was doing my coursework for my PhD, there was a master's student who was a woman who identified as a man. She was a transgender man who was a priestess at a satanic cult there in the Bay Area. And they were theistic. So when we're talking about Satanism, it's an important delineation between theistic Satanism and atheistic Satanism. And as Orthodox Christians, we could say, well, how much of a difference is there between them? And fair enough. When you look at like Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, they typically say, look, we're just atheists. We use Lucifer as a sort of rebellious symbol in opposition to the confines of traditionally the Christian God and his commandments as a rebellious figure of enlightenment, of freedom, of liberation, versus these more theistic orientations that are literally doing rituals, conjurations, sacrifices. And so her name was Johnny. So Johnny, the priestess at one of these satanic cults, she actually in one of the classes we did, she was giving a presentation on the satanic panic and basically talking about how all these naive Christians, anything they don't understand, they equate to Satanism. And upon doing some research for today's stream, it is fascinating how if you guys start to do like an online research looking into satanic ritual abuse, everything is basically pushing you away from the idea that this is any way prevalent in society. And it always points you back. I mean, I was on the Brave browser and just put in, infamous satanic ritual abuse cases, this type of stuff. And for the first 2 pages, it's all stuff telling you this is part of the satanic panic. This is overblown. This has to do with sort of Christian hysteria due to the changing normative morals of Western society. And because as we have become more eclectic and more open and more permissive of certain things, these darn fundamentalist Christians want to associate everything with Satan. So her presentation was basically arguing that all this stuff is, again, part of the satanic panic. Meanwhile, in her presentation, talking about what they do, and I've said this before online, is she was talking about their Eucharistic inversion, in which they would use things that typically you wouldn't put in your mouth, fecal matter, menstrual blood, this type of stuff, urine. And the idea was that if you can transgress these boundaries of disgust, then you can transgress any boundary. And this is one of the reasons why Lucifer or Satan or the devil is used as a sort of rebellious liberatory figure. So yeah, spirit cooking. Yeah, Michael Aquino, for example, the Temple of Set. So that is a theistic satanic cult. And it's probably one of the most prominent. In fact, it's going to be in the show notes that I want to present to you guys today. VP says poo-poo boundaries. Yeah, if you can cross the poo-poo boundary, then you can join a theistic satanic cult for sure. And I also have shared before my experience going to a Gnostic mass, which is essentially a Crowleyan inversion of the Catholic mass. And so some theistic satanic cults practice what's called the Black Mass, and it's similar to the Gnostic Mass. It's just the Gnostic Mass is sort of explicit within like Thelema, and it's not as explicitly satanic like some of these theistic satanic cults, but it's the same thing essentially. It's the inversion of the Christian mores. It's the inversion of Christian theology and this type of thing. So today, what I want to do is I just got a quick presentation. I put together a little bit of a document just to try to introduce the topic. And I also highlight how every one of the instances. So if you look at some of the most prominent instances of alleged satanic ritual abuse, you'll also notice that the Wikipedia pages or many of the news articles will always say this is alleged, and most people are hysterical about the invocation of Satan or satanic symbolism left at a crime scene. And so they always try to dismiss this as something that sort of needs to be swept under the rug. And people who want to bring it to the forefront, well, they're probably just religious zealots, and you got to be careful. And even within academia, I was looking up, I'm just doing some search. I'm not going to use anything for the stream, but that was the general tone and tenor of anything dealing with SRA. And an interesting little fact is, so I dual stream. I'm on StreamYard right now, as you guys know, and I dual stream to other social media. Well, for some reason, StreamYard was saying right before this stream went live, because I had already posted it like an hour and a half before, that YouTube had taken it down. And I can only suppose because it says satanic cults and ritual abuse. I was reading online and it said, don't label your video satanic ritual abuse, because this is apparently a label that will get flagged on all these video platforms. And I didn't even use SRA, satanic ritual abuse. I just said satanic cults and ritual abuse, trying to break it up. Everything seemed fine here on YouTube. Looks like we got plenty of people here that were able to access it. I had read online that for some people it covers the page and says that it may promote suicide or something like this, or basically your video won't get the reach if you use that label. So I find that very, very interesting that hadn't even began to stream, and for some reason on this topic, satanic cults and ritual abuse, Facebook took it down. So we're going to do a little bit of an overview on the topic, because if you're going to academically address this topic, it's actually very difficult, because almost every instance you find of this satanic ritual abuse, you find all these alleged accounts of, the intentions of investigators, the intentions of lawyers, Christian communities that they occur in, sort of tainting the investigation, labeling all this stuff satanic. So I'm going to introduce to you guys a few notable examples. We're going to talk about like what is a satanic cult, why is ritual abuse so common, and then I was wanting to play a video of Ted Gunderson. Some of you guys may be familiar with him. He was an FBI special agent back in the day, and he is one of the people that is sort of famous for connecting the SRA to the Franklin cover-up, which was a sexual abuse scandal dealing with children in Nebraska. And so I got I think it's a 39-minute video of Ted Gunderson talking about this. And another video that I was going to play that I've never shared on this channel, for example, I did a stream maybe a year or two ago. It was on Nathan Reynolds, who claimed that he grew up in a satanic cult family, high, powerful family here in the United States, and that they perform all these rituals and stuff that he was a part of. And now that he's a born-again Christian, he's trying to break out from it. And we had a lot of skeptics in the chat regarding some of his testimony, and rightfully so. We shouldn't believe anybody just based on their word. But another person we're going to be listening to today is Alondra Markman. And he was kind of blew up on the scene. It was about 11 months ago. And we're going to watch that particular interview in which he was with another woman. I think that she's also an SRA survivor. And Alondra Markman claims that he grew up in one of these cults, has very extravagant claims that he experienced and what his family and some of the cult was up to, including barbarous fighting between children and stuff like that. So we're going to kind of touch on this topic and how can we bring this in connection with Lent? I mean, obviously, we're in a very the most important season of our liturgical calendar right now. And we're 2 weeks before Pascha, guys. So my priest was saying this is typically the grumpy period of Lent, right? Where we're all kind of tired from the fast. This is where spiritual warfare tends to ramp up in people's lives. And if we can make any sort of positive remark on how this may relate to our Orthodox faith, even though this topic, and if you are very sensitive, maybe this stream isn't going to be for you. This stream is going to get into some nefarious things and trying to present the legitimacy of SRA and that these cults are actually working and functioning across really the world, but obviously most specifically the United States. But today was the feast day of St. Mary of Egypt. She is the patron saint of my church. And when we look at what's going on in Lent, this is one of the messages that my priest had today, is that we see the story of St. Mary of Egypt and St. Zosimos. Zosimos was a great ascetic, right? And even contemplated, maybe he was already perfected. He was renowned for his asceticism. And so some of the spiritual warfare that happens during this point in our Lenten journey is, one, to think that we're already kind of good enough, and doing the extra prayers, going to your liturgical services, almsgiving, fasting. We feel like, gosh, I'm getting kind of tired. It's getting difficult. I think I'm good enough, and that's one of the ways in which we become sort of lazy with our spiritual life. And this is really the last 2 weeks. We got to go even harder for these last 2 weeks in our celebration of Pascha. And then we have St. Mary of Egypt, who, as you guys know her story, Nympho, claims that she did every debaucherous act you could think of and lured many men into sin and temptation due to that. And yet she was forgiven. And at the same time, this is where Zosimos comes in, is that he realized that it was St. Mary, somebody who didn't live an ideal ascetic life, somebody who didn't live the life of renown that he did, that was actually higher than he. And so during this period, realize that if you guys are struggling right now spiritually, or are dwelling on something that you've done regarding sin or temptation, to not be distraught. God can forgive everything. And also don't get too comfortable either. So I guess if we can take any sort of message, it's one, that this stream is going to be recognizing that evil actually exists and it's all around us. And we've talked about before, and I have so many people that come on during these open panels and highlight that the recognition of sin was one of the first things that moved them back towards Christ. And I think that's generally true. We've seen the uptick in orthodoxy, especially after 2020. And that could be the recognition of evil, or that could due to people contemplating potential death due to the pandemic. But either way, recognizing, and this was true for my journey, living in the Bay Area, being, super pro psychedelics and psychonaut, spiritual, not religious. It's realizing that university professors are supporting minor attracted persons. There's protests and parades outside for this stuff. This is disgusting. And it was that recognition that there's people actually trying to normalize sexual attractions towards children. That is ridiculous. And that kind of shook me out of my moral slumber, if you will, and brought me back towards Christ, back towards the church, back towards truth. And so to present today's topic in a positive light, hopefully this is true for many people. And I would suspect that many of you guys watching, that before you came back, especially if you had an anatheistic return. Anatheism is a term referring to a return to God after God. So people like us typically grew up in a sort of cultural Christian Protestant nation. Maybe we were going to church as children, and we kind of slowly faded out of that. Maybe we went on our prodigal journey. Could be atheism, could be psychedelics, Eastern, whatever it is, occultism. And then eventually you come back to God. That journey is called anatheism. And so most of us have gone on a sort of anatheistic journey back to, hopefully, the Orthodox Church. And in that journey, recognizing that evil actually exists and there has to be some sort of moral arbiter, some sort of moral objective reality, is usually the first domino that gets us back into a church. So today we're going to be talking about some dark things. The point is to bring attention that these things are real, that this is one of the reasons why you shouldn't become complacent in your spiritual life, that spiritual warfare is all around us. Darkness is all around us. And at the same time, light is around us. So if you have positive relationships, family, friends, these are things to be celebrated. And as we look into satanic cults and some of this ritual abuse, we're going to see that it always has to do with these transgressions of boundaries. Sex is going to be a very prominent one. Sexual orgies, sexual promiscuity, sex with children, this stuff. And we find that the abuse then is also to sort of create, the destructive practices to destroy the soul of individuals so that they themselves as broken entities will contribute to the same chaos, evil, and degeneracy that was bestowed on them by often their family, which is really tragic. At least Alondra Markman that we're going to listen to, he claims that this was all part of his family. Now, I will say, when we're going to get into Alondra Markman, he's got some very weird spiritual beliefs now. So before the stream, I was looking into his X account and I was looking into his website. And, God bless him, especially if everything he said is true, because he has dealt with a lot of darkness for sure. However, he's like very much into aliens and believes that they can like enlighten you and that they could be spiritual teachers. So I say all this because this is like the murky water when you start getting into satanic cults, is that there's so much like, again, the murkiness. Is this guy real? I mean, did he make all this stuff up? I was listening to one woman who claimed that she grew up, her name was Mary. She claimed that she grew up in a satanic cult, but forgot most of these memories. And due to hypnosis, she was able to remember all these memories after the age of 37. And just from my own investigation into hypnosis and mental suggestions and implanting mental images, I'm just, a little leery. So I come at this topic as somebody who fully believes in satanic cults. I mean, I don't think that is a debate. They literally profess their beliefs. But when you start getting into the SRA, it's very difficult to pin down. And when we listen to Ted Gunderson talking about the Franklin cover-up, the powers that be are also preventing detectives, investigators from coming to ultimate conclusions regarding this topics, which again makes a lot of sense. So when we present today's interviews, take Alondra Markman to whatever degree of validity that you guys want. I'd be curious at the end of the stream what you guys think, if he's legitimate or if he's kind of making up some of this stuff. We'll find out. But certainly Ted Gunderson, he's been a point of controversy regarding the Franklin scandal. But the way he speaks, the things he talks about, makes a lot of sense to me. So we're going to be diving into all that stuff today. So smash that like, guys. Really appreciate you all being here. Blessed Lent again to everyone. Thank you so much. David James Flood gifted a COTEL Crew membership. Really appreciate you, David. And so did Justin Henley. Shout out to Justin Henley for gifting a COTEL Crew membership. Thank you guys very much. So I got a new thing to promote for you guys today. So if anybody's out there looking for a cookbook for Lent. So if you work out, if you are looking for something that can give you a high protein meal during, here we go. Let me pull this up. Let me pull up the screen real quick. During Lent, check out this book. So I was contacted by Father Moses McPherson, and he wrote the foreword to this. And this is Seraphim Braden. So Seraphim, he's actually an IFBB pro bodybuilder, and he put together this new cookbook for Orthodox Christians. So he's an Orthodox Christian brother down in Texas. And if you want to get a discount on this, here's the link I want to share with you guys right now. So if this is something you're interested in, check out my link right there, and you'll get a discount through my promo. It's just a link, so you don't need to put any promo code or anything like that. But if you've been looking for a fasting cookbook for Orthodox Christians, specifically regarding high protein meals so that you can continue to fast and make, at least maintain your gains, if not make some, depending on where you're at in your fitness journey, of course, check out this book right here. So this is, again, Orthodox Fasting Cookbook by Seraphim, and with a foreword by Father Moses McPherson. So check that out if you guys are interested. Also, if you guys want to support my work, one of the best things you could do is go over to my website. Today's document that I'm about to show you guys will be available for all website members, and you can do so with that link right there. And also, if anybody would like to schedule a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here, and we'll get into a private Zoom meeting and discuss any topic your heart desires. And if you have a sponsored stream, it feels so good to be back, guys, streaming. I'm going to be putting out so much content in the next month and 2 months that really, really excited. So we're going to be dominating some of these premium sponsored streams. The next one we'll be doing is Communist Persecution of Armenian Christians, which is going to be this week. And then we also have one where we'll be going over the eschatological prophecies of St. Paisios. So shout out to the Eschaton Vigil. The Eschaton Vigil has put together all, at least most of, not all, but the most that we could get our hands on of the prophecies of St. Paisios. And we'll be going over those probably this week as well. And he's got some new translations that we'll be covering here in very recent streams. We also have a sponsored stream on St. Constantine the Great that's going to be coming. So tons of sponsored streams that are going to be coming in the near future. So if that's something you guys are interested, please sponsor a stream. Would greatly appreciate that. It's a good way to support my work and create good content for the crew here. So with that being said, the last thing I want to say is if you guys are in the market for some Orthodox items, check out orthodoxdepot.com, orthodoxdepot.com. Use promo code COTEL, COTEL. You'll get 10% off all products, icons, prayer ropes, incense lamps, whatever it may be, t-shirts. Use promo code COTEL. You can help me out as well as a good Orthodox company here in the U.S. So thank you guys for that. Okay. So next thing I want to show you guys is just kind of introduce the document that I put together for today's topic. It's nothing expansive. It's certainly not a, some incredible academic document that took me days to put together. This is kind of just general overview of satanic cults and ritual abuse. So what is a satanic cult? That's usually a good place to start, right? A satanic cult is generally defined as a religious or ideological group that explicitly venerates or worships Satan, traditionally understood as the embodiment of evil or rebellion. So the atheistic dimensions like the Church of Satan use it as a symbolic rebellion against God, particularly within Christian theology. However, within modern religious studies, the term satanic cult is contentious due to its variance in practices and beliefs among groups labeled as such. And so that's one of the difficulties of talking about satanic, especially academically. Nobody really likes to embrace it unless there's some of these satanic or these symbolically satanic cults. But from an Orthodox perspective, based on the theology, based on the paradigm, we can look at various belief structures, just like the Finders or Nexium, and say, look, this is basically a satanic cult tied, Nexium tied with human potential and meditation and development of of supernatural powers and stuff like this. Maybe it's not outwardly explicit satanic, but the paradigm is that of a sort of Luciferian satanic paradigm. So when we're talking today, much of my perspective is coming as an Orthodox Christian and not as somebody who has to academically verify and justify the terms I'm using in a correct manner that correlates with the people who identify it as themselves. You get my point. So we have theistic Satanists, as I said, atheistic Satanists, occult Satanists. And so historical context, so historical accusations of satanic cults activities largely began in the Middle Ages. This is noted. This is just mainstream general history if you start looking into Satanism, and peaked notably in episodes such as the European witch trials through the 15th and 18th century. These allegations usually involve supposed rituals, including black masses, as we said, a sort of parodying of the Catholic Mass, desecrations of the Eucharist. We talked about with Johnny, the priestess that I had the pleasure to meet in the Bay Area, animal sacrifice. And this is one of the reasons why even the atheistic satanic cult, the Church of Satan, even though they're atheistic, they use it symbolically. They talked about how abortion, this is especially within the last couple of years, is part of their ritual activities. And I think they sued, was it the state of Texas, to try to legalize abortions as part of their religious expression. So even if they're not quote unquote theistic, I mean, the idea that they have to have abortions as part of their ritualistic religious practices demonstrates a continuity there, whether they believe that they're conjuring a real entity or not. And from our perspective, energetically, it's performing the same function. And so often they involve animal sacrifice, but in the contemporary context, I would make the argument that abortion is the continuation of the sacrifice, and this is a sort of human sacrifice, and I'm sure most of you guys would probably agree with that. Blood rituals, symbolic or literal, use blood in ceremonies believed to confer power, initiation, communion with demonic entities, and then sexual rituals, very, very prominent. Historical records and testimonies often included claims of ritualized sexual practices aimed at empowerment, symbolic inversion, or religious purity, and then desecration of religious objects and symbols. And so some of the verified, documented cases of satanic activity, even though if you go to look into these things, they will tell you, well, it's alleged, and these people claimed it wasn't, but the Fall River murders from 1979 to 1980. In Massachusetts, a series of murders were connected by police and media to alleged satanic ritual activity. Carl Drew, a self-proclaimed satanic figure, was convicted for his role in the ritualistic murders linked to prostitution and drug rings. Of course, the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, who gets did get love letters from women in prison and all types of stuff. He was a serial killer. And so he was not part of a cult per se, but he was a self-professing Satanist. And he, at least that we know of, killed 15 people. The Ripper Crew in Chicago, a group responsible for murders and mutilations, included ritualistic elements and identified loosely with satanic symbolism, though their practices were a twisted, idiosyncratic blend of sadism and occultism rather than organized theological Satanism. And then here are some cases, at least famous cases. Now, whether you would consider them, and I have the outcomes here because this is all tied during the Satanic Panic, which I will explain to you guys more in here just a few. But these cases are some of the more famous satanic SRA cases, but you'll find the detractors online. And so the McMartin preschool case remains the most notorious example of alleged satanic ritual abuse. Teachers and administrators at McMartin preschool were accused of sexually abusing and ritually torturing children, claims originating from one parent and spiraling into a community panic. And so the accusations included ritualistic animal sacrifice, secret tunnels beneath the school, and abuse involving satanic worship, human sacrifice rituals, and forced child participation in satanic rites. Now, look at the outcome here. After nearly 7 years and millions spent, no convictions occurred. Investigations found no corroborating evidence, and psychologists concluded children's testimonies had been significantly influenced by suggestive questioning techniques. The case is widely considered an example of mass hysteria and moral panic. Now, I believe that was the one I was looking into, and it was the Kern County. It was this next one or the McMartin preschool case. I'd have to look it up. I have all those tabs pulled up, but one of them, there was these alleged tunnels underneath the school, and the investigators claimed that they looked for these tunnels. There was no such thing, and this was then dismissed as this thing never happened. Well, apparently a individual who believed in these allegations came back years later to look for these tunnels that were these rituals and this abuse was occurring within, and he apparently found these tunnels, and no follow-up has been presented after that. So I'll just throw that out there. But anyways, the Kern County child abuse cases, this is also in California, the 1980s, again, right at the height of this, quote, satanic panic. Kern County saw a rash of accusations involving alleged satanic and ritualistic child abuse. Over 60 individuals were arrested, with prosecutors alleging secret satanic networks involving widespread abuse of children. Over time, many convictions were overturned due to prosecutorial misconduct, unreliable testimony, and lack of credible evidence. Investigations by the state attorney general found the allegations entirely unsupported. Now, the West Memphis 3, you guys may have heard of this one over in Arkansas. 3 teenagers, Damian, Jason, and Jesse, were accused and convicted of murdering 3 boys in West Memphis, Arkansas. The prosecution claimed that the murders were part of a satanic ritual. And what was the outcome here? Well, very similar. All 3 maintained innocence, and eventually, after significant public advocacy and investigation, were released under the Alfred plea in 2011. Subsequent evidence suggested wrongful conviction based primarily on hysteria, community prejudice, and flawed police work rather than genuine satanic activity. What about the Martinsville satanic abuse case up in Saskatchewan, Canada? This case, police investigated allegations of widespread satanic abuse at a daycare facility resembling the McMartin case. Nearly all accusations were eventually dropped or overturned, with evidence heavily criticized as unreliable and suggestive. Similar to McMartin, this was deemed a classic example of just mass hysteria. Improper investigation by the police. Those police that claimed they had discovered satanic stuff, they didn't do it properly, poor methods, and it's just another moral panic. What about the Orkney satanic abuse scandal in Scotland? Police and social workers forcibly removed children from their homes based on allegations that a satanic network of child abusers operated within a community in Orkney. And what happened there? Well, a comprehensive judicial inquiry found no evidence supporting the existence of any satanic ritual abuse. Authorities faced intense criticism for their handling of the case and for causing significant trauma and harm to the families involved. Now, another one that's very famous is the Franklin cover-up. And I bring up Ted Gunderson because we're going to watch Ted Gunderson today talk about his investigation into the Franklin cover-up, the Franklin child prostitution scandal. And so Gunderson, if you're not familiar, I imagine most of you guys are probably already familiar with Gunderson, because most of you guys are already down the conspiracy rabbit hole, and you're probably already familiar with even the video we're going to watch today. But he was a highly prominent former FBI special agent and a senior official who, after retiring from the FBI in 1979, became a private investigator and vocal advocate against alleged government corruption, child abuse, and satanic ritual abuse. Gunderson became involved in the late 1980s and early 1990s, right during the Satanic Panic, particularly around the time of the Franklin child prostitution scandal centered in Omaha, Nebraska. This scandal involved allegations that prominent businessmen and politicians were involved in a child prostitution and sex trafficking ring. And Gunderson publicly claimed that the Franklin ring had explicit satanic connections, asserting widespread ritual abuse and child sacrifice and organized networks tied to powerful political and social elites. Now, again, if you go look at official reports, that is a conspiracy theory if you connect it to any sort of satanic cult or satanic practice. And so Gunderson's alleged allegations mirrored the themes of widespread conspiracy prominent during the broader satanic panic era, although he specifically connected them with the Franklin case. And we're going to listen to him make the case for the legitimacy of these accusations. And so, the last thing, what is the satanic panic? Well, it refers to the widespread fears and accusations in the 1980s and 90s, especially in North America and Western Europe, that extensive networks of Satanists were secretly engaged in systematic child abuse, ritual murder, human sacrifice, and other horrific crimes. This era featured numerous high-profile accusations, notably indications of the McMartin, the Franklin scandal, Kern County, and the West Memphis 3, all four which we've just looked at. This widespread social hysteria, primarily in North America, involved fears of secretive satanic networks engaging in these activities. And most, I would say 80 to 90% of anything talking about the satanic panic says, oh, it's totally unfounded. And it all comes from sensationalized reports in mass media that then cause mass hysteria, especially amongst Christian fundamentalists and these traditional Christians that view everything in the dichotomy between good and evil. And that accusation surrounding daycare centers, obviously McMartin, and the longest and most expensive criminal trial in the U.S. history, which ended without any convictions. And law enforcement investigations largely debunked the existence of widespread organized satanic ritual abuse, attributing claims to moral panic, suggestibility, media sensationalism, and religious anxiety. So that, again, this document, if you guys want it, is going to be available at the website after the stream. But you can see the general approach to this topic is very dismissive. And if you talk about potentially, especially people in high profile positions, I mean, we know about Epstein, but if you start talking about Epstein being tied to satanic ritual, even people that are in the truther world that are like, okay with the idea that there are mass pedophile rings, as soon as you start bringing up some of the satanic ritual stuff, it's kind of a bridge too far for many people. So I want to show you guys some of the, let's see, where is everything that I got pulled up? Here we go. So, I just pulled up a few tabs of these things, and you'll see everything is always alleged. So here's the Finders. If you guys are familiar with the Finders movement. So it was an intentional community and cult founded in Washington, D.C. in the early 1970s by a United States Air Force Master Sergeant. And what are some of these accusations? Well, according to U.S. District Court records in Washington, a confidential police source had previously told authorities that the Finders were a cult that conducted brainwashing techniques at a warehouse in a Glover Park duplex raided by law enforcement. This source told of being recruited by the Finders with promises of financial reward and sexual gratification, and of being invited by one member to explore Satanism with them, according to the documents. Police sources said that some of the items seized showed pictures of children engaged in what appeared to be cult rituals. Interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm surely there's not many more of these. The Family International. This was more of a sort of Christian apocalyptic cult turned like group sex, wild 60s countercultural cult, the Family International, and David Brant Berg being the leader of that one. Obviously, Nexium is one that's very popular here in recent terms. And let's see if there's anything on. No, of course, nothing regarding Satan in this one, but it's like an offshoot of like the human potential movement and a bunch of weird stuff. Here's the Franklin child prostitution ring. Again, everything is allegation. So if you look up satanic rituals, you see, it's down here, satanic panic. You see everything you find regarding these cults takes you to the Satanic Panic page, which is supposed to tell you that all this stuff is overblown. This is part of a mass hysteria. None of this stuff is real, guys. You're probably part of a conspiracy theory. Here's another one, the McMartin preschool trial. As we said, one of the most expensive trials in U.S. history that led to 0 convictions. And you just start putting in the S word, and all of a sudden you can start finding the allegations, the media coverage, but how this stuff is essentially overblown. Same thing for the Martinsville Satanic Sect cult, the Kent County child sex abuses, the West Memphis 3, even though even these guys talked about literally their satanic satanic disposition. And then the Fall River murders. I mentioned these briefly. Richard Ramirez and the Ripper crew. I mean, just very weird stuff. This one in particular, they would take people to the Satanic Chapel, and these people were actually convicted. They had a box. So after they would kidnap women and rape them, they would cut off their breasts, and they would put one of their breasts. One of the guys would, again, this stream is not for children. So if you are with your family, please, this stream is probably not the best one for you. But what they would do is they would cut off the breast, and one of the guys had a sexual fetish around it, and he would then masturbate on the disembodied breast, and then he would put it in a box. And so one of the things that led to the conviction of these guys is they would bring them to their, quote, Satanic Chapel at one of the guys' houses where they would perform these rituals. And the police found the box. So they found 15 breasts, single breasts of various women that they had raped and killed. So is that a conspiracy theory? Are you crazy if you actually believe in any of that stuff? Well, according to the mainstream reports. So now, with that being said, guys, what I want to do now is introduce you guys to Ted Gunderson actually talking about the Franklin child prostitution scandal. And you tell me if this seems credible or not. And then I want to dive into this one here with Alondra Markman. And this is the one that was really getting views and was kind of going around the internet about a year ago. It's 11 months ago is when this thing was published on YouTube. Some of you guys have probably seen this. Some of his claims seem to be pretty out there. And as I said, I looked into this guy and like, what is he creating now, and kind of what does he believe? And he has some weird, like, spiritual, ancient alien type beliefs, very new age. So I'm not sure. Is this somebody under their own hypnosis? I mean, there is no way to verify the stories that he claims in this interview, but people like Ian Carroll, I believe even Candace Owens maybe were mentioning this, but Ian Carroll most specifically talked about this particular man's testimony growing up in a satanic cult as if it was legitimate, and it may very well be. If somebody went through all the abuse that this man claims that he went through, it makes sense. So David says, looks bagely. Well, that's actually going to play into his testimony because Alondra Markman is an Ashkenazi Jew, and he claims that the cult that he was a part of actually selected people based on their Ashkenazi heritage as a sort of prerequisite to be part of the cult, because they had some type of genetic, this is according to him. I'm just going to play his interview here in a few, but he claims that they are selected for like genetic biological markers or something regarding the satanic cult. So we're going to touch on a little bit of that later. So smash that like, guys, and please send in any questions or comments as we go through today's stream. Because we're just going to be, I'll be hitting them as soon as they kind of come in. There's not really a flow to it like an interview or anything where we need to keep the flow going. So Jay Hamza sends in $25 over on the dono chat. Thank you so much, Jay. He says, I just want to point out, be careful, as Satan has destroyed Protestantism and now is using people to try the same tactics to destroy the Orthodox Church. Yeah, absolutely the case. Unfortunately, he can't. One church, the one founded by Christ, the gates of hell will not prevail. Many are looking for truth and some not so much. You guys are in my prayers. Well, thank you so much, Jay. God bless you and your family. You guys are in my prayers as well. And then over here on YouTube, Boomer Slayer says, if you know, you know. Yes, exactly, Boomer Slayer. And I think for some of today's conversation, that's going to be the case. So please, if you'd like to support my work, my channel, my research, the content, you got a question or a comment, please send in a super chat. Would greatly appreciate that. And if anybody out there is feeling generous, please give some COTEL Crew memberships. We could always use more COTEL Crew memberships. And I'm going to have some member-only content here coming in the next week now that I'll have some free time. And Yo Mama sends in $10 over on Streamlabs and says, crazy stuff. This really is a fallen world. Lord have mercy on us, truly. Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why we're in the last 2 weeks of Lent, guys. You got to go to your weekly services. I know Jenny and I will be attending some of the church services this week, probably the pre-sanctified on Wednesday. And then on Holy Week, we're going to try to make as many services as we can. So, Justin C is asking for the cookbook link. Here's the cookbook link. Let me get that for you. So anybody else looking for the cookbook link, that I'm posting it in the chat right now. So it's the gumroad.com link. Click that link and you'll get a discount and you'll be able to help me out as well. And help, an Orthodox brother, Brother Seraphim, IFBB pro bodybuilder, and his new cookbook. So support them. Oh, thank you so much. Austin DeTulio gifts 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Austin. Really appreciate that, my man. God bless you. Okay, so let's get to the first video I wanted to play. I want to play a little bit of Ted Gunderson. Now, we may not watch the whole thing, but I thought this is a important little blast from the past. Some of you guys may already be familiar with this video. As I said, some of you guys I know are already conspiracy heads, but those of you who aren't, this is a pretty wild rabbit hole to go down regarding this topic. So here's Ted.
About this as the same person as the West Coast, unless there was something to this. In the last 22 years, I've talked to hundreds of what we call adult survivors. And the next major case I'd like to mention is the Nebraska case. In 1988, I received a phone call from Lincoln, Nebraska. One of my college friends said, Ted, you better get back here. There was a major investigation headed up by John DeCamp, former state senator, good friend of mine. And John had taken on the task of exposing a group of high-level politicians in the state of Nebraska and some of the top businessmen. As a result of this case, the kids who were part of the network came forward. There were 80 children because of the publicity on a pedophile pornographic arrest. 4 of them gave statements. 2 of the 4 later recanted. 2 stood by what they originally initially said. And what we developed there was that children were being taken out of orphanages and foster homes, driven to Sioux City, Iowa, 184 miles away, and flown to Washington, D.C. for sex orgy parties with congressmen and senators. The person in charge is a fellow named Larry King, a black man, not Larry King Live. And he was president of the Franklin Savings and Loan, which was a savings and loan established to help the minorities. He had a salary of $17,000 a year. He was paying $5,000 a month for a condominium in Washington, D.C. for these parties. As a result of the investigation, we learned also that there was an international child kidnapping ring operating out of the Midwest and all the way into Washington, D.C. Paul Benassi, one of the kids who I interviewed for 5 hours, I've got him on 5 hours of tape, by the way. I need to make that tape available to you, but I'm so busy, I'm kind of like a one-armed paper hanger that I just haven't had time to do it. But Paul Benassi, when he was 10, 11, 12 years old, was recruited by these people to be one of them and to act as a buffer and in shopping centers, parks, public places, to attract the children at his age over near the car. The adults involved in the ring would grab them, and they would kidnap them. The kids, of course, talked about satanic cult ceremonies. They talked about the kidnapping ring. Paul's life has been turned upside down because he refused to recant, as did Alicia Owens, the other person who refused to recant. Alicia's still...
Now, isn't this interesting? As I just showed you guys, going through the document, all 5 of the most famous SRA cases, there's all these allegations about how they, the children were told to believe something, the investigators had a religious bias or something like that. And here, Ted Gunderson, and even with the Franklin case, remember, just go look it up right now. Go on the Wikipedia, go look up articles. I'll tell you, unless it's already more conspiratorially oriented, they'll tell you that is an allegation. People recanted. This was all sort of a false narrative. And here Ted's telling you, actually, these children were forced to recant some of their testimony. And he has 2 children that actually refused to recant from what they saw. And they obviously point directly towards satanic involvement. So the reason why I wanted to play this video is because he's making a case, a very logical, rational. This isn't some hysteria motivated by the satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s. No, this is a man who went and investigated something and found exactly what we're talking about. And yet it's still reportedly alleged.
Serving time in prison for lying to the grand jury. She was convicted of that. When she was 14 years old, she had sex with the chief of police, Bob Wadman. That's what she said. And the other kids backed her up. Other top businessmen who were identified were Harold Anderson, publisher of the Omaha World Herald, the head of the Society page in Omaha, Eugene Mahoney, who was a former vice squad police officer in Omaha and is now head of the Forestry Service for the state of Nebraska. And the list goes on and on and on. The pedophile ring, homosexual pedophile ring, they were transporting these kids from Omaha to Des Moines, to Minneapolis, to Milwaukee, to Madison, and back to Omaha. So, unfortunately, the investigator prior to my entering the case, Gary Caradori, had learned about some pictures. And these pictures were the smoking gun of the case. Pictures of politicians having sex with children and other unbelievable acts, boys and girls and so forth. So the official photographer of the group was a fellow named Russell Nelson. And Rusty was a farm boy from Nebraska. He had never seen the bright lights of the big city. And he was enamored with the rich and the famous and the jet airplanes and the trips around the world, actually. And he was a professional photographer, and he started out by working in a gay club, taking pictures for the club. And he was recruited from there into the sex ring. Rusty was not himself homosexual, I'm convinced of it. I've spent quite a bit of time with him. He, in connection with his work, would sneak a roll of film in on occasion when he was photographing these acts, because they were taking the, quote, official film away from him as soon as it was completed. Rusty sent these pictures back home, and he also scattered them around the United States, negatives and photographs themselves. He was sold for sex by Larry King to a businessman in Washington, D.C., and he said to the businessman, let me go in the bathroom and wash up, and instead of coming back out, he went out the back window and he disappeared. He was living on a farm, one of his parents' farms in Nebraska for quite a while, and the FBI came around to his parents' home asking for Rusty. And the mother said, well, he's over at such and such a farmhouse. They went over and interviewed him. And of course, it was basically, as he told me, it was an harassment. And then he left and had to go into hiding someplace else. His folks came back several months later to the farm to check it out. It had been abandoned. But it was in a beautiful place, a mile and a half from any neighbor. And somebody had gone in with high-powered rifles and totally destroyed it, tipped over the furnace. They shot 13 bullets through the refrigerator door, front, out the back, and out the house. You know how powerful weapon that had to be. They shot bullets into the ceiling and out the walls. There was a van outside that was running. They shot it up, broke all the windows. Rusty, I asked Rusty, in fact, I asked him on camera, and I'll tell you a little bit about Rusty in just a few minutes, in addition to what I'm telling you now. How and who would know that this was there, that you were there, and so forth? He said the only people that knew were his parents and then the FBI. He's convinced that this was a tactic by the FBI. John DeCamp, the state senator, who was really headed up the whole investigation, and who, by the way, has obtained a $1 million judgment, has been diligently working on the case and has refused to back down. Rusty, after the FBI interviewed him on his farm, decided he had to hit the road. And so he obtained a van and some window washing equipment. This is pretty clever of what he did, because he knew that they'd be tracing him, looking for him. And he drove all over the United States, in and out of towns, and washed windows. No record of a pay stub. But unfortunately, about 3 years later, they caught up with him in Portland, Oregon. And he was arrested for having a broken taillight. In the back of his van, he had pictures of nudes, which professional photographers do on a regular basis, nothing pornography. And the police told him that there was a picture of a juvenile in the back of the van, and therefore they arrested him, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He never faced his accuser. They would never tell him the name of the person who was supposedly a juvenile. Rusty's out and on probation. When he gets off probation, I located him on a farm in Oregon. And I drove from Las Vegas up to Oregon, picked him up and brought him back. And then I said to Rusty, Rusty, let's go look for those pictures. And Rusty said, good idea, let's go. So last October, November, for 2.5 months, Rusty and I lived out of the back of my pickup truck. Nothing fancy, a 4-cylinder Nissan that could barely get up the hills in Colorado. And as a matter of fact, on one occasion, it stalled. We were going up through this pass, and I just couldn't go any higher, even in first gear. Anyway, Rusty had a number of locations where he placed these pictures, at least he said that. There were 5 in Colorado. We went to the first one, which was an abandoned mine mill. He had placed them up behind the rafters toward the back of the mill. The pictures were gone, but there was a dynamite cap there. The second location was up about 2 miles up a mountain. Went up there, and it appeared that those pictures had been washed away. The third location was a mine. We found the mine, and it had a steel door on it, so we couldn't get in. The fourth location was in a cave on the side of a cliff near a waterfall about 300 feet straight down. And Rusty had weighed 165 pounds when he hit it in that cave. He now weighs about 240. So we went into town, and I got a nice rope, good rope that holds 2,200 pounds, as I recall, a harness, hooked it on the back of my truck for safety, and we lowered him down. Well, he slipped, and it was getting dark, and he hurt himself, and unfortunately, because of the difference in the weight, 165 to 240, he couldn't pull himself back up. So I had a handy talk. I said, Rusty, come on, we'll come back next year. Come on up. So we finally got him up, and we went on our way. And going back to the farmhouse where somebody shot it up, and I would have to say it was probably the FBI, Rusty had hidden some of the pictures under the desk, the top of the desk, in the farmhouse. These are pictures of some of our leading politicians having sex with kids, okay? And that when we were there, we examined it, and of course the desk had been pried open and the pictures were gone. The question then arises, well, Rusty, how do I know there are any pictures? And if there were, how do we know that somebody came along and got them? And how would they know that they were there? Rusty told me when he was in jail in Portland, he thought he was doped, drugged. And they'd come in, guards and other men would come in at night and interview him, and he thinks he may have told them at that time where some of the locations of the pictures are. But there are some other locations that there's no need to discuss them here in detail. But as a result of that trip, and really the real basis for the trip is to do do our own video, Rusty and John DeCamp and I. Now, On the back table back there, I've got a videotape that says Conspiracy of Silence. Let me tell you about this. And this is where I came up with the idea to grab Rusty and go find these pictures. There was a TV crew from Yorkshire Television in England that came over in the early 1990s. They were here for 7 months. And they filmed this whole case, the one I'm telling you about. It was to be aired on Discovery Channel, May the 4th, 1994, and even listed in the TV guide. But at the last minute, somebody came in and bought up the rights and ordered that all the copies be destroyed. I hold in my hand a bootleg copy of that show. And what we are going to do, Rusty and I and John DeCamp, we're going to complete this story, and nobody's going to buy us off. I don't know if we can get it on Discovery Channel or not, but we're going to do our own video. We're going to basically include the information here on this video, and we're going to update it. We're going to include the $1 million judgment. We're going to include information about more details about the kidnapping ring, and including an interview with Noreen Gosh. Noreen Gosh's 12-year-old son was kidnapped back in 1982, Johnny Gosh. There's a book out. It's called Why Johnny Can't Come Home. And I was supposed to have a case up here tonight, but something happened. I guess, I don't know, maybe they're in the mail someplace. But Paul Benassi helped kidnap Johnny Gosh. And he gave us a statement to that effect. And they took Johnny that first day. He was kidnapped on a Sunday. He was delivering his Sunday Des Moines Register. Took him to a safe house in Sioux City, Iowa. They kept him there. And according to information developed by the mother, Noreen Gosh, the snatching of the child was ordered by a fellow named Michael Aquino. Michael Aquino, head of the Temple of Set.
So again, we mentioned the Temple of Set and Michael Aquino earlier. If you guys aren't familiar, you may have seen it. I've brought him up multiple times in previous streams. This is the man, American political scientist, military officer, and Satanist. I mean, look how he does his eyebrows. You can tell this guy's a weirdo. And so this was actually, Michael Aquino was one of the people that Johnny, that transgender satanic priestess that I told you about, that she actually liked. And he was actually in one of her presentations in the class. Well, he was the founder and high priest of the Temple of Set, which is a theistic satanic cult, right? This isn't Anton LaVey. This isn't, oh, we just believe the devil is a symbolic rebellion against God. No, this is a theistic cult he is the founder of. And so that is who Ted Gunderson is mentioning right now.
Out of San Francisco. This is in her book. And Michael Aquino wrote me a letter because I quoted him someplace and challenged me on it. But I said, hey, it's in the book. It's in Noreen Gosh's book. Anyway, young Johnny and another kid ended up stealing a car, and they went into hiding. They lived on an Indian reservation for quite a while up in northern Minnesota, and they were discovered there, and they had to move on. Yeah, Johnny Gosh is alive today. I know approximately where he is, but he doesn't dare come forward because he knows too much. He knows too many people are involved. The video, by the way, the back there on the back desk is I'm selling it for $30. And if you decide to buy it, the second video will be sent to you free. But
thank you so much, Tiki Tack, for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate you, brother.
If you do buy it, there's a sheet back there, and I want you to be sure to sign the CD. Seems like every land outside San Bernardino, California, worthless land, basically. That's why I got it so cheap. You learned there was a water table underneath it. He made a deal with the Japanese, some Japanese private businessmen. They were going to build a plant because of the water there. He went out one day to inspect the land. He was met by soldiers, U.S. Army uniforms, with automatic weapons, told, get off the land. You can't come here. Dave ended up going to court. He lost in court. But what they didn't know about Dave, or they didn't do anything about it, he's a musician. And so he wrote this song, Judas of D.C., and it talks about how we are being double-crossed by the Washington gangsters. It doesn't matter if they're Republicans or Democrats. There's not a dime's worth of difference between any of them. Okay? But this goes along with the videotape if you decide to buy it. Also, there's something else that's very interesting. In the trial, which resulted in a $1 million judgment, I have the transcript back there. It's probably 160 pages. It's available, and it's fascinating reading. I've accumulated 22 years of research and written these own books for myself. I might make $5-6 a book. Okay, so you don't get rich doing this. In fact, you go broke doing it. Every dime I have, I put into this cause. So I urge you to buy some of my reports, my personal reports, and make copies. I'm not in this because there's nothing back there copyrighted. Buy it, make copies, spread the word, okay? Now, there's something else that I need to bring to your attention. This is a book about the CIA, the Finders. This tied back into the Nebraska case. The Finders is a CIA covert operation, as far as I know it's still operating, that was established in the early 1960s. And their task at hand was to kidnap children. Going back to the Nebraska case, what do they do with these kids that they kidnap? Paul Benassi has attended 6 auctions where they auction children. Anyway, any age from 3 and 4 all the way up to 21.
And just as Slowboy Whiteboard mentioned in the chat, you know, Tom Holman, the new head of border security, the border czar for the Trump administration, talked about almost 400,000 children that have gone missing. And we know every year there's hundreds of thousands of children that go missing that aren't recovered. So out of the 300,000 that have crossed the border, I forget how many thousands have been found and recovered, and some of which are actually with their captives who transported them across the border and are essentially their handlers. But imagine all the children worldwide that go unfound and are auctioned off and part of these sort of underground networks. So that's partly why I wanted to bring up Ted Gunderson and sort of legitimate some of this stuff as somebody who investigated it. And then we're going to get into Alondra Markman.
They put a tag around their neck. They're in their underwear. They have a number on the tag, and people down below bid on them. The kids sell for between $15,000 to $50,000. I've even heard of one kid going for $100,000. Well, who's buying them? According to Paul, you can't afford that, huh? Okay. You don't want it either, I'm sure. According to Paul, they're one of the locations outside Las Vegas, about 50 miles outside Las Vegas, and I located it. It's an airstrip. I went up with a friend of mine, and we found it. And there were airplanes there. There were campers there. And there were men with foreign accents. There was a police officer there, at least somebody in a uniform. These kids are auctioned off and put on the airplane, and nobody knows what's happened to them. Now, in the last 4 years, meaning I network with a lot of people, of course. We've had information from 2 airline employees, one in Denver, Colorado, and one in Los Angeles, LAX. In Denver, Colorado, I happened to be lecturing there that night that this occurred. And an airplane with 210 children was being fueled in Denver. The employee who was working there asked one of the adults, there were 2 men and 1 woman, what's going on here? Who are these kids? She said, Child Protective Service is none of your business. Mind your own business. Those kids were being flown to Paris, France, okay? In Los Angeles, LAX, another one of my sources received a call from an airline employee, same situation, different plane. And these kids were being flown to Paris, France. There, in 1997, there was the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997 that was passed under the Clinton administration. And what that did, it took children who were abused out of the biological home, put them in foster homes, and then put them up for adoption. Okay? And you don't know this, or maybe you do, but if Child Protective Services receives even an anonymous phone call from a neighbor, and that neighbor says that that parent slapped that kid, they can come in and grab that child. The title of the act again, Adoption and Safe Families Act, yeah? It's not Safe Families Act, it's Safe Kidnapping Act. There are 3,000 children who are taken away from the biological parents every day of the week. A friend of mine, good friend of mine, in fact, I used to have a radio talk show, I had a radio talk show for 2 years.
And so think about, again, CPS just taking children, and obviously there are some circumstances in which that's required. But we already have seen, was it the state of Washington took a family's child away because he wanted to be referred to as feminine pronouns. By feminine pronouns, he wanted to be identified as a woman. The parents refused, and the state took the child away through CPS due to essentially them being harmful towards the child for not recognizing their gender expression. And we already know multiple cases in Canada, but this is happening all across the United States. I think that there is even, and Slowboy, if you're still with us in the chat, wasn't there a case in Indiana that this popped up? I don't know. I think they got the child back, but I think even here in Indiana, which is a very red state, conservative, that somehow CPS got involved with a family who refused to recognize or give hormonal care, gender affirming care to their child. So this is happening all across the United States. And now, how does this relate to this type of stuff? Is I believe personally that the sexualization of children through some of this trans ideology, this is a way to already get young people sexually identified, thinking about sexuality, sexual expression, often before even puberty, a time when typically when we want to preserve the innocence, that Christianity wants to preserve the innocence of children. That's one of the goals. That's what it means to be a guardian, a parent, the protector of the innocence. In these satanic cults, Satanism in general is always trying to violate the innocence of children. And we can look at our culture now. I mean, if you're driving around, major metropolitan cities, the billboards are explicit often with sexual iconography. So our culture is quickly trying to take away the innocence of children. And that's even if you raise them in a protected environment. So, oh yeah. So, yeah, Slowboy Whiteboard said yes in Franklin. So that's where I'm from. So yes, somebody even in conservative Republican red state Indiana, Child Protective Services are still taking children if they're called based on this trans ideology and stuff like this. So I just bring this up as a very interesting bridge, right? So this was talking about child abuse, this or that, trying to get CPS to take out children out of their home. Well, now we have an entire ideology that if you don't attempt to sexualize your child, if you don't attempt to castrate them so they'll never be able to have children, if you don't confuse them and allow them to cross gender and sexual boundaries, well, then you're a bad parent and we get to come and take your child, and then we'll go ahead and sexualize them ourselves.
Her name is Suzanne Schell. She had her kid taken away from her. She was like Noreen Gosh. She wasn't going to stand for it. By the way, Noreen's been on every TV show in America, too. And in addition to this book, Why Johnny Can't Come Home, and she's done a tremendous job. And if every parent who lost a child would do what Noreen Gosh has done, we wouldn't have this problem. Okay, Suzanne Schell, she's a fighter, too. And she wrote this book, Profane Justice, Comprehensive Guide to Asserting Your Parental Rights. This book points out that in 1974, 4 to 5 children a day were dying of child abuse. In 1997, 4 of 5 children a day were still dying of child abuse. The only difference was that half of them died in foster homes. Between 1997 and 2002, the goal of the federal government is to double adoptions by offering financial incentives to remove children from their homes and terminate parental rights. Of all the children taken from the biological parents, placed in foster homes, and then for adoption, of all the children that are taken, only 37% return home. So what's happening to these kids, okay? Well, I just recently learned, and I don't have any, I've got a lot of material for the screen, but I'll get to it in a minute. Anyway, what's happening to these kids is they're being placed in the foster home, and then they're being adopted. And once they get into the system, they're adopted. You don't hear about them anymore. They are gone, okay? I suspect that some of these kids on these airplanes were adopted children. There is a network of criminals that have set up a money-making scheme at the expense of our children. When a child is placed into adoption, the federal government gives the state $4,000 for each child, and up to $6,000 for a special needy child. There's a racket going on in America today where the kids are being placed into adoption, And let's say, for example, Joan Smith, say 4 or 5 years old, is placed up for adoption and is adopted and is gone. That same person is then changed to Joan Smithley. And then they change the name again. They change it 4 times. And then they adopt that same person 75 times. 79 times $4,000 is a lot of money. And you have this network of criminals, you have attorneys, you have judges who are involved in this. That's not all. That is not all. Then what happens is once the adopted parent gets the child and starts receiving the money, and by the way, they go on Medicaid right away too, by the way. Once the adopted parents gets a hold of that child, and then who knows what happens to the kid, of course. In this particular area in the Southwest, this network of criminals files a lawsuit against that person and collects the money. Okay, and then that person who is set up as the adopted parent receives their cut, the networks receive a cut, the judges receive a cut because they're involved in phony lawsuits. This is going on right today. The person who gave me this information, and again, I just received this about 2 weeks ago, went back to the Clinton White House and talked to them about this, contacted the FBI and talked to them about this. Nobody is doing anything about it. Too many high-level people involved. Okay, let's scoot on. By the way,
so now we're going to move over to Alondra Markman. So I don't know if, again, you guys have seen this interview. I got it sped up to 1.25. And as I said, I'll be curious. I'm going to place a poll to see what you guys think in regards to the validity and veracity of Alondra's statement. So it's the guy on the left is Alondra. I know it sounds like a woman's name. Anika Lucas is the interviewer. And from my understanding, she is a SRA survivor, and she hosts interviews with other people. And this Alondra Markman, he was really making the rounds on social media again about a year ago regarding this particular interview, where he claims that he grew up in a satanic cult. And so we're going to listen to some of his testimony, and I'm curious what you guys think about it. So smash that like. Again, if you guys want to support my work, please send in a super chat on Dono Chat, Streamlabs, or here on YouTube. And if you're feeling like Austin DeTulio and feeling very generous, please give some COTEL Crew memberships. Always appreciate that. So here we go. Without further ado. So
very happy to see you again. I'm glad we got reconnected.
Me too.
And, we know each other as survivors of SRA. And I guess maybe we can start with having you tell us a little bit, an overview of, your life and SRA experiences.
Sure.
Thanks.
I was born into a satanic family, so this was on both sides of the family, going back quite a few generations, as far as I'm aware. Probably going back many generations, but it gets difficult to know. In her front life, sometimes with other survivors, I'll say front life and back life. So the front life is kind of your public life that everybody sees, and your back life is what most people don't see and where a lot of the abuse happens. So in front life, my mother was a sex worker. By choice. I mean, supposedly. And also an activist on behalf of mental patients. And those were kind of the two big things. In back life, she was a slave to some other members of her family and also non-family members who were part of the cult networks. So it's very complex. And my father, in front life, was one of her clients. And they never had any formal relationship. But it's since come to my understanding that he was also from a bloodline that the cult network was interested in. And so their pairing was arranged behind the scenes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know I've also observed that the people that when they took an interest in me, they first had to know about my blood, which I didn't know anything about. And I don't even know what they did and how they measured it, and I know that you even have a very unusual blood type. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, AB negative, which certain aspects of the network take a very deep interest in, unfortunately for me.
Yeah. So did you grow up with just your mother, or?
In front life, yes, it was primarily me and my mother. And that's essentially what I was coached to say. I live in a single parent home with my mother. In reality, I was surrounded by people all the time, other handlers in the cult network and different types of sex workers. And I was made to be a sex worker or sex trafficked. So there were a lot of different kinds of adults around. And some of them...
I'm sorry.
And some of them had family roles with me, or they would play the roles of certain family figures.
Oh, I see. But you were trafficked right from when you were very young?
Yes, I was.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
So that was your first role, because your mother even, publicly was a sex worker, and then you immediately got sex trafficked.
Yes.
And so in the network setting, in the backstage, these are SRA families. So it's the sex trafficking. Was there other stuff happening already at a very young age as well?
Yeah, a wide variety of torture and abuse was happening. I suppose I can just get right into it since we're here for this purpose. I witnessed not just sex trafficking, but a lot of different types of violence and torture. Some of it lethal to the participants, murders. So that was also happening.
See, Ed makes my point I made at the beginning of the stream. He said this rabbit hole was what originally led me to seek Christ, and glory to God for that, because it is a dark rabbit hole. And despite the attempts to make it seem verboten to actually believe in these satanic cults, that it's just part of a satanic panic, it's actually very real. And, the recognition that this stuff actually exists brings a lot of people back to Christ in order to seek the good. And so glory to God for that, Ed. Really appreciate that comment, because I made that point earlier.
And you were there, and did you feel that you were not going to get killed, or was there sometimes that you might have gotten killed? Did you feel that because of maybe your blood or whatever reason, or because your mother was in it, or did you feel that there was a purpose there for you?
Yeah, several questions in there. Well, there's a complex relationship between hypnotic suggestions and programming to commit suicide and the practical need of a cult to keep people alive to use them. So there's this push-pull that a lot of us, especially when we're born into it, we experience this from birth, where we're being told to kill ourselves and to live at all costs at the same time. And that's part of the cognitive dissonance and the psychic torture aspect of it, just a glimpse.
Yeah, like in your day life, in your front life, did you even know?
I was in and out of knowledge. Of course, you can't forget things like this, not really. They can fade from awareness. And that's usually what people call repressed memory. But of course, my body would be in horrible pain, and I was aware that I was missing time. So I couldn't not be aware of it, but I stayed as unaware as possible, because there was very severe torture. If I showed that I remembered an experience, there was usually very severe torture. So I learned to hide. If I did have a memory of something, I learned to hide it. And then over time, I learned to lie to myself and, kind of actually repress some of the memories more deeply.
So you're talking as a child, if you remembered something and somebody found out, then you would be tortured to make sure that you would forget again, or that you would never even start talking about it?
Yeah. And maybe I should pause, back up a little bit. I was being fragmented into different personalities from the time I was born, from the time I was an infant. Even before the formation of any coherent personality, my experience and my sense of self was being fragmented into lots of different alters. One thing that would happen if I started telling, about a certain torture experience or a certain sexual experience that I had had, that aspect of me that was telling would be shamed and punished and banished, and made into a separate altar that I wasn't supposed to access. So I have many dozens of altars, some of them quite well thought out, and with a lot of thought put into them, and some of them just sort of stopgap experiences, like, oh, that was just a shut up altar, and it's like, it's a named individual within me, but its entire purpose is just to stop some certain story from coming out.
And so just to ground your beginning of your life, you were in Long Island, basically.
Yeah. Most of what I'm describing is taking place in the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that where you lived?
Yeah.
Okay. So you lived on the Lower East Side, and I'm sorry, when was this happening? When were you born?
Well, my birth certificate may be a little bit off. I'm still learning a lot about my background. I have other family and siblings who were not supposed to exist, that I was never allowed to be conscious of. So I'm still piecing things together. But my birth certificate says I was born in '86. So I guess I'm 37 or so.
Okay, so very young.
Yeah. And everything I'm describing was already happening. I mean, from birth up until like around 4 years old was when these kind of dissociative systems were pretty solidified. So this is very, very early. Like most of this is pre-conscious.
So your Lower East Side and the people around you, some of them are presenting as family members, even if maybe they're not, but they're basically, you're surrounded by handlers.
Yeah.
While your mother is continuing to be a sex worker.
Yeah.
And you're her only child.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not actually her only child, but
you're the only one that lived in that place with her.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm assuming that because she was single also, that you were there's just a lot of people around you all the time that were not.
This is true. Yeah.
Good people too?
Not so much. When I was a little bit older, my mother had a boyfriend who was not in the cult. So he was a very positive person for me, and he actually later adopted me as an adult. And so that's part of the reason I'm sane today. I did have a few healthy people around, healthy adults, teachers at school, people outside the family, and that one boyfriend. But he wasn't allowed to see her for very long because the handlers didn't like me having a positive role model. So he was cut off from me for most of my childhood.
Sorry to hear that.
Thanks.
Yeah, so it's these people that are your handlers, were there any that you were particularly close to? I mean, obviously, I was very close to some, so. Yeah,
I had very deep bonds with several of them. One whose name was Patrick was like an uncle figure to me. Yeah, we were very, very closely bonded. I think, through all the torture and shame and confusion, I think there was also some real emotional bonding there, positive emotional bonding. So yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings. But he would be introduced as my uncle sometimes, like if we were out in public, and I was alone with him. That's how he would be described.
But for sure he was a handler because he was also abusing you and he was also training you?
Yeah, I was being trained for a wide variety of things. Most obviously to accept sexual violence, to perpetrate sexual violence, to accept and to perpetrate physical violence. I was being trained as a killer. I was being trained also as a breeder for the cult. So I was supposed to create many children, and I did create many children after I passed through puberty later on.
So this is now you're talking, after you passed through puberty, so this is in your teens now.
Yeah, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I'm just saying I was basically being trained for constant sexual activity from the moment I was born, like absolutely constant. And that was normalized as much as possible in my household.
Oh, with your mother as a sex worker, it's kind of normalized already, yeah?
Yeah.
But she also had a nonprofit.
Yeah, she did. She also did a lot of really good work, actually, as a civil rights activist on behalf of people with mental disabilities, especially people who had been brain damaged by psychiatric practices like electroshock therapy.
How interesting.
Yeah. So that's, well, I don't want to just let it flow, see what happens. Yeah, the cult network uses electric torture, electroshock quite pervasively.
Yeah.
So that was the case for my mother. It was the case for me.
And me.
Sorry to hear that. But then also in Front Life, she went through medically prescribed, like mainstream psychiatric electroconvulsive therapy, which is a whole different thing, similar and related. I mean, part of the idea with that was that it would discredit her.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stigma associated with mental health treatment.
Of course, yeah.
So in spite of the fact that her issues came from her circumstances, you know, she was kind of isolated and made to feel crazy, and went through quite a few mental health treatment experiences, mainstream ones. Some of those were before I was born. So I don't, yeah, I wasn't there for some of them, but she went through many electroconvulsive therapy treatments at psychiatric hospitals, in addition to what was happening at home and in the background.
Well, I've worked with several people. You know, I was never in a psychiatric institution. I was never diagnosed even. Yeah, I was just in therapy. But I work with several people who were survivors that have spent a lot of time in psychiatry and have a lot of, and had handlers right there on the unit, making sure basically that they're not remembering it. It seems to be always the same story.
Yeah, that was definitely the case.
So your mother was really, in a large sense, she was very much a victim. She was very much on the victim side of the network, except that she also abused you?
She did, yeah. Yeah, we had an incestuous relationship from birth also.
Yeah. That must be so complex.
I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, my mother also was very much like a victim, always very sexualized, and she also abused me, you know, but she presented very much as a victim on the outside. And of course she was, at some point, she was not so much in her adult life when she was my mother. She wasn't really being victimized, but she put herself in these situations all the time where, at the very least, she got very humiliated.
Yeah, it was made clear to me from the age that I could even hold the thought that my mother was a token and a pawn. And I mean, she would be raped in front of me and beaten in front of me. And, you know, it was, yeah, I mean, they wanted me to know that she, you know, was at the beck and call of others. Yeah.
And then you're getting the message that you don't have a mother.
Also.
Mm-hmm. So were some of the handlers perhaps better parental figures, or?
I guess in some senses, yeah, some of them were more coherent. And so I was able to bond with them more consistently. That's true. Yeah.
But the rape was coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
They were all guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the normalization of that sexuality with children, you know, in my public role, I was even supposed to promote that, promote the sexualization. But you were supposed to be doing that very much behind the scenes, being an object as well as a perpetrator. And do you think that you were being groomed to stay in the network?
Definitely, yeah. I was supposed to be a breeder for the whole rest of my life after puberty. And I was supposed to, you know, in the cult network way of looking at things, I was supposed to be programming others to have similar experiences, to be breeders themselves. It was perceived in me that I would make a very good handler myself, that I would make a very good programmer. And so a lot of my training was in that direction as well.
Right. Well, actually, I know you to be a very creative, artistic person. Mm-hmm. Interesting. I mean, not that you don't have many talents, but mostly I know that you have poetry workshops and poetry classes.
So I get that he has a very unusual way of speaking, and it makes you skeptical of certain things. But some of the stuff that he claims, so people are saying that he claims his satanic abuse was debris. It's more than that. He's getting ready to get into these death matches that he claims very, very famous people and major politicians attended. And so, like I said, you can be skeptical of this particular guy. Nobody can verify anything that he has to say. And similar to the Nathan Reynolds video that I did, where he claims he grew up in this elite American bloodline that was part of the satanic cults that are working behind the scenes. But whether you think he's real or not, The point is that these things actually do happen. And at one point, I don't want to skip too much, but he is so slow talking. It can be drawn out for a while, but he actually gets into part of the reason why he was selected is because of his Ashkenazi Jewish heritage, and that this is actually something selected for. And he talks about these death matches. So I was wanting to try to find that. I didn't mark where he mentioned all this stuff. We'll just start here where he's talking.
The normalization of that sex, I didn't see it either.
I don't think so. Yeah. Yeah, and then I was supposed to be an actor. I had auditions for different films. I remember I was supposed to be in a film called Dead Man Walking, I think, or Dead Man on Campus, something like that.
Dead Man on Campus.
Yeah.
I don't know these films.
They tell on themselves with these titles a little bit. And the movie came out. It was produced. It's out there with another child actor, not me, because I totally froze during the audition process, and I didn't do what I was coached to do. So I think that kind of threw things off a little bit. And I went through the requisite torture for being a failure and all this stuff. And I didn't do a lot of modeling or acting after that. So I guess I was on a different track. But it was the thing that I found really challenging. Like, the modeling was easy because I didn't really have to talk. It was mostly still photographs. The challenge came when I had to actually talk and have lines as an actor. And I'm like, wait, I'm supposed to be silent and not use my voice. And this is like going against that programming. And I just couldn't. I mean, it was mental overload, because if I was using my voice publicly, all sorts of stuff would come out that I wouldn't want to come out. I mean, and so that's basically why I froze. I couldn't do it, so it's understandable. It's part of the programming. But if I could get past that hurdle, if I could learn to use my voice essentially as a lie, if I could get through that, that's a major crucible. And if you do get through it, then you're basically on your way to a career as a satanically supported actor. But I couldn't do it, I guess. And from then on, my voice was very, very shut down, to the point where when I got away from my mother later on as a teenager, I was practically nonverbal.
Wow.
Yeah.
So interesting. It was almost like you're not successful at lying enough, so you couldn't even dissociate enough, really, because I did some, not public. I had a performance singing, but I never acted that. But they were preparing me for that also. But it was almost like I felt like I was acting when I was sold to men. I was, going around with this big politician in Germany. I was acting too, but I always fully believed it in the moment. And I think that's how the dissociation, the part that I had been made into to be my persona, was going to be the sort of light and fun and sexy. I was 10, but I was that persona around him. And then I also found a lot of pleasure in there because he also really was very nice to me. And I think that was a big hook for me, that these people looked up to me, or they, because they knew that I'm going to be a star. And so they were already, so my treatment was just so much better compared to before, but I was completely dissociated.
Shout out to Austin DeTulio. He sends in a $10 super chat. He said something to lighten the mood. Thank you very much, Austin. Do appreciate that. He said, we had a relic, the femur of St. Mary of Egypt, at our parish today. Wow. What are you in the U.S.? Curious what general area, Austin, you're in. You don't need to dox yourself, but just curious. That is a very cool relic. Like I said, St. Mary of Egypt is our patron saint at our parish saint. So, down in Australia. Oh no, Blessed Lent from Australia. Thank you, Mr. Scream. God bless you. Blessed Lent to you and yours. But that is very cool to have a St. Mary of Egypt femur as a relic. That's very cool. She's a very important saint just to our spiritual community. So thank you very much, Austin, for lightening the mood a bit. And Go sends in 5 over on Dono Chat, says, this is indeed a dark stream, but it's important for us to be wise as serpents. Agreed. And I believe learning about these people and topics is part of that process. Well, thank you very much, Ghost. As always, thanks for the content, and God bless. Well, God bless you, Ghost. Thank you very much for the support. And as I said, this isn't a light topic. This isn't a easy topic to digest, but it was a topic I've been wanting to cover for probably 2 months that I've been putting off just because I didn't want to do all the research, and I was so busy with my dissertation. So anything that was a little bit easier to do, or I already had planned, I did those. But I do think it's important to be aware of a lot of this stuff. And like I said, I don't know what to believe regarding this guy. If he did go through all the things that he's getting ready to even talk about a little bit more, it makes sense why he talks the way he does, why he's sort of, lacks any sort of public speaking confidence and stuff like that. But, I'll leave it to everybody to make their own opinion. But the stuff he's talking about, that was really the important point for me. Just he's kind of the most famous or most popular person to talk about this in the last year, I would say, is that this stuff is really happening all over the world. And you can, claim that it's not, or that these things are overblown. But I think there's considerable evidence when you actually dive into this rabbit hole, even if almost all these cases have alleged regarding the SRA dimension to it. I think they're real, and I think it's important just to be aware of. And if anything, it should be a catalyst for you to get closer to Christ, to get closer to your Orthodox Christian community. And this is, this is the last 2 weeks of Lent. So this is a huge point in our liturgical calendar. So maybe this is an impetus for some people to actually go to church.
I guess not. Thank goodness.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I was ultimately not dissociated enough either, that it seems that if you have this connection to truth somewhere, for whatever reason, because the way that you were raised, it sounds like you shouldn't have, it's purely, sometimes it's just pure spirit. It's not, I had this person taking care of me in the first 3 years of my life, and I felt loved by her, and I knew what it was like to be loved, but you had something that you couldn't do it. It's very interesting to me that the way that you speak about your voice, that you were meant to lie, and that you froze because you're just not dissociated enough, and then somehow shut down completely. Like if there's no truth, there's nothing.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. So then, that was probably about 9 at that time that I'm describing freezing and botching the audition. They put me in different roles where non-speaking roles. It's funny how normal acting terms kind of blend with these very abnormal things. So then I was sort of pulled back, and I was used. I was still used sometimes for theatrical purposes, for entertainment, but usually in a sexually exploitative way or in a silent way. I remember being used for a lot of different gatherings, parties, like as a sex slave, and essentially as an actor, but mostly a mute one. That was definitely the case for some of those years, pre-puberty, 10, 11. And then they started sending me to a breeding compound.
A breeding compound?
Yeah.
Okay. What is that? I can guess, but
it's a dedicated facility for breeding human people. In my case, this was in Jalisco, in Mexico.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So I'd be brought down there once I hit puberty, and I was on all sorts of steroids and aphrodisiacs and drugs, and it's a very intensive physical program that they put you through when you're slated to be a breeder. They try to induce puberty as early as possible, and they put you on different sexual enhancement drugs and different mind-numbing drugs, and it really turns you into all you can think about is sex. It's because of all the drugs that you're on and the environment that you're in, and that's the idea. If you're in a breeder role, you just basically have sex constantly, or you're raped, more properly, just every day, all day. So that was the case for me. Starting around 12 or 13.
So was that place like a lab?
I often compare it to a monastery, to be honest. It was like a satanic monastery. It had kind of a feeling of a cloister.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it was a breeding
But it was a breeding facility. Yeah.
So there were other children like you?
Many other children. Yeah. And I would have to rape them, be raped by them. Mostly other young girls who had just hit puberty, but also grown women, older women, all sorts of people.
So it's a monastery where it's not random sex, but it's sex everywhere all the time.
For me, that was the experience. I think there were different roles that I didn't get to experience as much going on there. But yeah, for me, it was basically that.
And it wasn't random. It was always someone looking over your shoulder and directing you?
Pretty much, yeah. If not in person in the room, then, you know, through a camera or a two-way mirror or something.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, I actually hadn't heard about the existence of such a place before. I mean, I've heard a lot, obviously, working with people.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a few people I can name in connection with this. Maybe not at this time, but some of them are famous or moderately famous people. One of them is a major philanthropist in the Seattle area.
Really?
Yeah.
That is connected to that program. That is to say that they have like a big role in it.
Major philanthropist in the Seattle area. What is Seattle known for? Microsoft. Who is a famous philanthropist related to Microsoft? Geez, I wonder who that could be. So hard to put your finger on it. A man who's defined by his philanthropy, billionaire, Seattle,
Or
yeah, major role. So the philanthropist I just mentioned, I called her the abbess. She was basically the director, as far as I could tell. I mean, of course, this is from a child's perspective, so hard to say what's really going on. But from my perspective, she was the abbess of this monastery. And basically her word was absolute, and whatever she said went. And for me, that was usually, various forms of.
Yeah, I think it was Bill and Melinda myself. So I suppose this is where I have always been skeptical of the whole Melinda Gates. I had no idea that Bill went to Epstein Island story. I just don't. Maybe it's true, and maybe it's somebody else very different than the Gates family. But I think she absolutely knew everything that was going on. It's probably just they didn't want to live together anymore. And I mean, didn't she get a ginormous settlement from Bill? So I don't know, but it seems like very probable it could be that family.
Yeah, just sexual functioning. I mean, I would often be chained up for sometimes days or weeks at a time, and they just bring in women one after the other.
How dehumanizing.
Yeah.
I do relate. I mean, I was also supposed to be, that persona that was age 9, from 9 to 10. It was supposed to be a wild sex thing. So I was drugged all day long. All these different kinds of drugs, these little pills I was taking all the time. Also to just make sure that I was always constantly feeling sexual and everything. I don't know what they were. I know they were uppers. And then I was also, but then as the persona even made to participate even in some rituals. But this is all age 9, age 10. So it's kind of really concise for me in the period that this was happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I should also say, I'm calling this a monastery pretty intentionally. It wasn't just sexual. There was a lot of ritual associated with it. And basically, to produce the sort of children that they were interested in, they believed that different forms of black magic were necessary. And so there was a lot of careful planning around that. And there was a lot of ritual involved, prayers and sacrifices and killings, all sorts of things going into this process, basically, so that I would conceive what they considered desirable children.
So, and do you think that is a lot to do with your blood?
I think a lot of it has to do with that. Yeah, they're very interested in bloodlines. I mean, they're also just very interested in people who can survive. I mean, a lot of other people, other boys, for instance, I would just see them dying, from just sheer exhaustion, from stress, from all kinds of things. And but I was one of the ones who was just there year after year.
Yeah. Well, I'm really sorry.
Thanks.
So you were taken to Mexico, obviously, and then, but you were still officially living in New York City.
Officially, yeah.
And then did you also go to school? And
I did. I had many aspects of a normal life in my front life.
yeah.
So, I mean, I'd be taken away from New York sometimes for weeks at a time, during summer breaks, for instance, obviously, maybe not obviously, but yeah, I'd be brought back to New York for a lot of the school year, and I'd have a relatively normative experience in school during the winters.
Yes, and then on the breaks, that same with me, like for that year anyway, I was gone the whole summer, I was gone for every vacation, and then that was when the training was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Or what, in your case, what was it?
Yeah, training, breeding. I was brought all over the world, and different people were brought to me also, because this breeding process is very intricate. It's very delicate. They do a tremendous amount of genealogical research. They have agents all over the globe who are looking for certain bloodlines, but also certain psychic characteristics, other kinds of, I'm not privy to everything they're looking for, obviously. But this is a very global program. And so I would sometimes, if it was deemed helpful to their plans, I'd be brought to other places, other countries, or they would bring in women and girls from outside the US to me.
And like, okay, so genealogically, you're Jewish mostly?
Mostly. Yeah, according to Ancestry.com, like 95% or 90 something percent Ashkenazi Jewish, yeah.
And so can you talk a bit, because this is so specific, right? We're talking about bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for a lot of people, that doesn't even mean anything at all. Like, who cares usually? So can we just talk a little bit about that, or what we do know?
Sure. Well, I'm no expert in this area, but I do have a lot of experience with people who are.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So there are different schools of black magic. This is my understanding so far. Again, I'm not interested in black magic. I don't know a ton about it. Like, I haven't really researched it on my own, but for some purposes, the Jewish bloodlines are considered essential to the process. Basically, it's like you need a Jewish person to have the desired result of your spell.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure how much is superstition and how much is real. But that was definitely the case. In many cases, as I mentioned before this interview, when we were talking, they need specifically a descendant of Solomon. So apparently I qualify for that. I have enough of a direct blood relationship to the historical Solomon that they could use me for these rituals.
Well, I want to stay a little bit with your...
That would be if Ashkenazis are Hebrew. I know that's a debated question, but I did find it interesting that he talked about how these black magic rituals actually demand participation by certain bloodlines, specifically of Jewish descent. Very interesting little tidbit there by a Ashkenazi Jew himself.
Experience also, because you also, okay, so and pretty much everyone that I know and that I speak with was also trained to kill.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that there are some, and that was also part of your experience, that are trained as soldiers, children that are trained as soldiers. That is to say, more deeply into the Delta programming. Yeah. And then one person I actually interviewed, Chantal Frey, she didn't speak about that with me, but she has spoken about that, I believe in her book, but maybe also in other interviews for sure, that she was also used for a spectacle. She actually described a star. It was a birthday present for him, and a famous movie star, and she had to fight a large man to the death. Mm-hmm. And when we spoke, you mentioned that something similar had happened to you.
Yes, this is true. I was also trained for fighting, and well, very dirty fighting to kill. And I had a whole period of my earlier life. I guess this was just before I was, or it overlapped a little bit with my modeling career. I was sold to a man that I knew as Louis Valou, And I feel okay using the name because I'm pretty sure it's a pseudonym. I very much doubt it's his legal name. But this guy named Louis Valou was essentially part of organized crime in Lower Manhattan in Chinatown. And he was one of my handlers growing up. And I had a very intense relationship with him on many levels. There was a period where he was grooming me essentially to take his position. And
in the mafia then?
Essentially, I mean, I'm not totally clear on the details, but it's some aspect of the mafia or organized crime. And I had to do a lot of physical violence towards other children as part of his initiations. And some of that culminated in public death matches, cage matches with other children in Chinatown for paying audiences.
How would an audience, I mean, this must all be inside the network. I can't imagine that there'd be something like that anybody could ever figure out, and it's happening right downtown.
I'm imagining the invitations were very exclusive. Yeah, I strongly doubt any random people would find out about it.
And what kind of places would this even happen in?
All sorts of venues.
Really?
I mean, to be honest, I was often drugged and blindfolded and taken to these places, so it's often hard to say where exactly they are. I know some of them are in wealthy enclaves outside the city, like in Westchester County, upstate a little bit. I was taken to places like that. But then there are also versions of it that happen right in Chinatown, just in basements in Chinatown, which is, it seems like just some sort of racist fantasy that someone would have, but it really does happen there.
And the idea that you would want to go and see two children fight to the death, that it could only be network, where the people that are really in it and believe in it, they don't even see a child in a child. They don't even see what a child is. They just see creatures that are below them or something.
That's true. Yeah, like cock matches, like animals fighting, pretty much like that.
Except more exclusive.
More exclusive, more expensive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you did tell me that you saw some prominent people present at some of these.
I did.
Events.
Yeah. There different politicians would show up sometimes, actors would show up sometimes. And a lot of the really wealthy people who are anonymous would show up, of course. And some of them, I still don't know their names, but people in positions of power within the cult. I've been thinking through, different names and if I want to name people and
totally fine. And we can cut it out if you change your mind also, that's
okay.
No problem. But also, let's just, let me ask you, is it like, when we're talking about levels, right? Is it like on the local level? Is it on the state level? Is it on the national level? Is it on the international level?
It's on every level. Yeah. I think I saw people who I didn't necessarily know, but I understood them to be prominent people of other countries, international politicians and leaders, definitely. There are Catholics who participate in this practice. You
mean clergy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were Jesuits specifically.
Makes sense.
Many different kinds of. There were officials from abroad. There. So some of my ancestry is Hungarian, and there were people from who I understood to be some basically high-ranking Hungarian politicians who would be there, who were particularly interested in my career as a fighter, apparently. So there's seems to be a very established practice of these kinds of things. I almost died several times.
Of course.
Naturally.
Of course, yeah.
Had my scalp ripped off of my head almost entirely and had to recover from that.
You mean you have weapons?
Usually not, but people are always sneaking things in, little blades or poisons or, it's of course, even if you place restrictions on it, people are going to find ways around it. So, I was taken by surprise quite often. I'm just glad I'm still alive. Louis was very fond of needles, and he was an expert in manipulating these very small needles that could basically be hidden sort of under a fingernail usually, that could be very deadly. So there were quite a few weapons, but they were concealed.
So I did have an experience that similar, but it's not exactly the same, because I was never made to fight children, you know, for a spectacle. But I was, and I felt like it was the part of the training in Germany that I underwent that was for the killing. It felt like it was the final, like that's your graduation. It felt like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was put in a room that had white leather padding. You know, maybe it was a psychiatric hospital. Mm-hmm. And there was a peephole, and there, I know that it was big enough, and I could see that the person who owned me at the time was watching. Mm-hmm. I assumed that it was filmed. Mm-hmm. I assumed that this was actually a snuff film. Mm-hmm. That I was a child, you know, I was the little child who was naked, and two people were brought in, adults who were dressed. And I know that I had to kill them. And I felt that they didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that I have a feeling that the snuff film, it was the surprise element was what they were after. Mm-hmm. So that's the experience I had that resembles that. But it wasn't really a fair match, to tell you the truth, because I had a weapon and they didn't. And of course, yeah, it's maybe hard to think that a child, you know, is capable of that. But then we were trained. We were, yeah. So the idea, I just have this image now, you know, of the Lower East Side, the basement, children in cages, being made to fight to the death. I mean, yeah. And I'm sure it was also girls, correct? Yes, also. I usually didn't have to fight girls, but it did happen. So my next question, obviously, that seems natural to follow this, is that you did survive, amazing survivor, yet you were not completely on board. There was this little thing inside of you that, you know, your truth somehow, you know. So you go, we have to do so much, we have no choice. First you got out, like, we talked a little bit about it. How do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about what you think happened? Sure. Well, a lot of things were happening. As I approached being an older teenager, after I'd been a breeder for already 3 or 4 years, I was around 16, it was made clear to me that they wanted me to assume positions of authority and greater power, that they wanted me to become a handler and a programmer, maybe someone like Louis, someone who could, basically they saw that I had great aptitude for training, for teaching, for guiding, and they wanted to use that to guide people into these forms of depravity. And for that to work, it became increasingly important for them to have my consent, because you can't, essentially they couldn't trust me to do the job unsupervised unless they had my full consent. I mean, full, I don't know about full, but you know, they had to ensure that I wasn't just doing it because I was being coerced. It had to come from inside me. I mean, any teacher of anything who's good at what they do will tell you that's necessary for teaching, regardless of the subject, regardless of whether it's ethical or not. Yeah.
And I thought that one of the other elements to the voluntary enactment of these things has to do with the efficacy of the magic ritual itself. And, you know, magic is all about a sort of transmutation of energy in certain ways, speaking, performing rituals, colors, herbs, whatever it may be that you're using. And so for the black magic, again, if this guy is telling the truth, but for the black magic that he's talking about in these breeder programs, which we know are real, these violent sexual cults, and even violence like death matches. It makes sense that for the black magic to be efficacious, you need somebody who's going to be one of these leaders or teachers that actually believe or be voluntarily part of the satanic cult, so that energetic transfer is part of the efficacy of the magic ritual itself.
So I think there's some wisdom there. So essentially there were a period of years, especially it was very heavy when I was about 15, 16, where they were presenting me with anything they could discern that I desired, absolutely anything. I mean, you know, I would desire some actress, for instance, and she'd just be brought in for me to rape if I wanted, or, you know, anything that I thought of. I mean, you know, like, oh, you want to...
Or speaking within the narrow confines of your breeder training, of course, you know, like you desire, but then you're completely programmed. So,
this is
you know,
true.
I
mean, desire, I eventually learned that my desires were much broader than I'd been led to believe, thankfully, and I appreciate that grounding. It's, yeah, I mean, I went through very intensive, basically, attempts to entice, I guess. They took me to private islands in the Bahamas, showed me basically how some of the trainers were living.
Would that be like the Jeffrey Epstein Island?
Among others, yeah.
You were there.
I was there.
And he owned it at that time, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And
you came across him too, by any chance?
I did.
I've heard a lot about him privately from people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's relatively safe to name these days.
Yeah. Is there anything that stood out that since that is something that people know, since someone that people know was involved with these things, is there something that you remember about him?
It's been a while since I've thought about him. He was never, I didn't get that close to him personally. I would just see him around. I mean, when I was being taken to these islands, I would see all kinds of popular and famous people. About Epstein himself, he was really able to switch on a dime from, you know, absolute murderous rage killing to just completely pleasant and like affable. And his, I guess his programming was more successful than mine, because he was very quick on his feet and totally changed to suit the situation always. That's probably why he was in the role that he was in. Yeah, I remember that about him. Tremendously versatile and very good code switcher. Just really, you know, he could deal with the high-minded and the low-minded, and just kind of bring everybody to their basis level and send them on their way to to experience whatever horrible things they might want. So, I mean, it was a well-run operation. Obviously, it wasn't just him. Like, huge numbers of people on these islands specifically, incredibly disciplined staff. Not that I'd want to use discipline for things like that, but
no, but I mean, there's a lot of science behind it, and it's, you know, it works.
Yeah,
that's what you mean, right?
Yeah.
That the staff is very well disciplined. Like, everybody knows exactly what they do, and it works.
Yeah. So I can't speak that much to him because I never had that much of his attention. It's just like sizing me up for something and then immediately on to the next person. So I can't say I was ever spending much time.
So that was on his island, particularly, if he sized you up for something and he went immediately on to the next, that was on his island.
Yeah.
So this is at the time when you're a teenager and you're being enticed,
Mm-hmm.
you're being shown what you can have, basically, if you follow along.
Yeah.
You can be like him.
I don't get it. Why do people click on the stream with the title and then try to tell me I shouldn't do streams on darkness? Dude, why are you guys here? If you don't want to watch the stream, just leave. That's fine. That's totally fine. I don't get why anybody clicks on a stream on a topic they don't want to watch. What's the point of that?
Yeah, needless to say, that was not so appealing to me, but it's really gross. I mean, the amount of wealth that was just on display. I mean, literally anything you want. I could have owned my own island if I wanted, you know, if I cared about that sort of stuff more. I'd probably still be in the cult. but thankfully I don't. So basically, it came to a point where they just couldn't use me anymore without consent, or not for any role that they would want me for. Essentially, they basically said, "We're done with you, unless you want to join and make this your own thing."
Yeah, so I've heard about like the 5 I wills, in the programming that the children, go through these steps. And normally at 13 is the last I will. And then the 13 is then the age that they become, let's say, willing participants in all the harm.
I guess that rings true for me, because they were trying to convince me very aggressively from 13 to 16 to convert, or whatever you call it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not like I was innocent at this time. I had plenty on my conscience, plenty that I was forced to do, beyond just the cage matches. I couldn't even begin to describe all of it, the rapes and killings that I was forced to participate in. So it's not like I, was necessarily above any of this. I had sadistic murderer alters who, when in the right circumstances, on the right drugs, with the right handler, easily could kill dozens of people. So I can empathize with that experience and that sort of mentality. Yeah, so I don't wish to indicate that I'm above any of that, but because you just...
Oh, we can't. Like, no child goes through that experience that is prepared to be part of it. I mean, it was also the same for me in the year. Again, 9 to 10 only, but, discovered at age 9 and then trained for 1 year, but there was a lot of promises. So I think it's the same, the promises that were made about what my life was going to be like. It had a lot to do with wealth.
Yeah.
Had a lot to do with, the fame, of course, but the respect I was always going to get, the apartment, the best apartment in Paris, and the house on the Côte d'Azur, and the yacht. I mean, it was all told me repeatedly that I would picture, this very easy and luxurious lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot to say no to. Just to mention it, like we were children and we said, no, I don't think so. That takes something,
It takes guts, for sure. There was a lot of back and forth for me from 13 to 16. I mean, each time I said no in a different way, I would be tortured in a different way. And they would try to basically kill the alter who had said no and create another alter that they could talk to start the conversation over. So
you actually went through a lot of torture.
I did.
Because you didn't want to. From 13 to 16, you did not give them the last I will, it sounds like.
I didn't. No. What was really liberating for me was, I think it was 14, was my first real suicide attempt, in the context of being tortured to try to elicit my allegiance. I was being held in a cell. I believe it actually was in the Bahamas somewhere. It's a very warm place. And I managed to find a way to cut myself to slit my wrists. And I was committed to it. I was like, okay, this is my only way out. And they wouldn't let me go through with it. They found me, they resuscitated me. I healed. And that was kind of when I started to realize that I actually had some power in the situation. Like, I never thought that I did before that. It was like, well, I'm going to, it's basically like, I'm going to have to yield to this at some point because I don't have any other option. But after the suicide attempt, I was like, oh, I do have other options. Like, I do actually have some power. They're trying to get something from me that I don't actually have to give. And that was very, very empowering. Yeah. And resulted in a lot more torture and attempts to erase my memory again, and a lot of electroshock. Horrible, horrible electroshocks, especially at 15. Yeah, but I just wouldn't do it, I guess.
So, good for you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got a couple super chats sent in. Let's address those. Def Camp sends in 10 Canadian, says, what do you think of Kathy O'Brien? My bad if you're already talking about her. I'm late. No, I didn't talk about Kathy O'Brien. I mean, I can't validate, nor can anybody, Kathy O'Brien's story. So for those of you who don't know, Kathy O'Brien, she wrote a book. I believe those were out in the 80s and 90s as well. talking about being part of basically MK Ultra programs of mind washing, sexual abuse, stuff like that. And I think that stuff absolutely goes on. So if you can anybody validate her story? Can anybody validate Alondra Markman? No. And they've been used to sort of deride Kathy O'Brien, like she made all this stuff up. I give her a little bit more credence than that. And I think that this stuff is accurate, but how it connects with the satanic ritual abuse is that it's always alleged, right? It's always dismissed. And so for Kathy O'Brien, they claim that there's been inconsistencies in the timeline that she wrote in her books. And this has been the way to sort of disprove the narrative that she was actually used by the government and MK Ultra projects and again, this sort of sexual abuse type stuff. So I can't validate Kathy O'Brien. I'm certainly aware of Kathy O'Brien and her story. And I think that it's part and parcel of this sort of nexus and sort of murky web of how all these, I just listed to you guys at the beginning of the stream, like the 5 most famous SRA cases, and all 5 of them are filled with like the allegedness. This is part of the satanic panic. This is part of Christian fundamentalists, like evoking their sort of theological perspective and fears onto things that are occurring. So just like they do with the SRA, the same thing that they did to Kathy Bryan. So that's kind of my, but thanks for coming, Def Camp. God bless you, brother. Thanks for the support. Neon throws in 10 and says, DPH, who is your patron saint again? It's St. Patrick of Ireland. I'm starting the catechumen process and want to get baptized. Well, glory to God, brother. Glory to God. Welcome. He says, I'm going to choose Prophet Elijah. That's a really good patron saint. That's a great patron saint. So God bless you, brother, and welcome to the church. That's really wonderful to hear. So next one, Jay Hamza throws in 20. Thank you so much, Jay. He says, this is saddening that this happens, but we know what we are dealing with. Exactly. This is important to know. I agree with it. That's why I present. I know that this isn't, out of all the times in the liturgical calendar, this wouldn't be the time, but I just finished my dissertation, so now I can make a bunch of streams, and this was one that I had in the queue for a while. So it is what it is. But I do think it's important to be aware, whether this guy is lying or not, whether, I know some people don't like Ted Gunderson. They think that he was a Fed and all this. Whatever you guys think, that's fine. I'm not here to convince anybody to believe anybody else. The point is to discuss satanic ritual abuse and that this is a reality, whether you want to believe certain people online. Because I agree with, this Alondra Markman guy. He has some very weird spiritual beliefs now, like spiritual aliens, alien enlightenment. I saw something. He's into like the star seed, new age stuff. But if it's true what he's saying, the dude is so destroyed. The guy has gone through so much abuse, so much fracturing of his psyche that, the trauma, it makes sense that he would be a little bit weird. And if he was sexually abused, both as a receiver and a giver, it makes sense that he would kind of talk with a lisp and potentially, be homeless. I don't know the guy's sexual orientation. Obviously, he kind of appears like he might be gay. That would make sense. We've talked about before the sexual abuse rates of specifically homosexual men. It's like in the 70, 80 percentile. So that would make sense. I'm not here to tell you guys you need to go listen to Alondra Markman and go follow him online. He has some very strange spiritual beliefs, but if what he's saying is true, it may not be. But even if it's not, I think all these things that he's describing are happening. And I didn't get the whole thing in the chat, him talking about the Ashkenazi connection, because he's also implying that the people in charge of him are Ashkenazi. It's not, I didn't get what people kept going on in the chat about. This is some Hebrew fantasy. What? If anything, he's actually implicating them in something. He's already implicated Jeffrey Epstein, whether, again, we don't know if he met him or not, but he's claiming that he actually met Jeffrey Epstein. But Jay said, he said, one thing that helps me fight this is the teaching of many saints. Amen. Including Elder Thaddeus of Vidovnica. Yeah. Well, we should always appeal back to the saints and the tradition. I mean, that's what we're led by. Those are the sort of guiding posts for our faith. So I totally agree. And if you're somebody that's prone to despair or depression, yeah, maybe don't watch this stream. This was a stream I wanted to do probably 2 months ago before Lent started. But here it is. And I think that it's actually an important topic, and it's something that we all have to recognize. I mean, this is a topic that Dyer and Jamie have both discussed on their channels. This is not, I don't get the people that are like, oh, why would you talk about darkness online? Because we're Orthodox Christians, because everything is a spiritual warfare, because this stuff is really happening and it's all around us. That's why I said demons among us, that these cults are real. And I believe Ted Gunderson, and whether I believe Alondra specifically, I do believe the general pretext that many powerful people that he claims that he saw at these events do operate in this world. So I think that it's important. And I also think that it's an important catalyst for us to actually rejuvenate and renew our faith and our repentance in Christ. So thank you so much, Jay, for the support, brother. Slow Boy Whiteboard, shout out to my sister. She says, have you heard the Confessionals podcast about the Joshua Tree cult? Eastern Euro bagel cult summons a portal at a rave. So good, easy to listen on 2 times. No, I haven't listened to that. Maybe that'd be a really good other stream. I'm going to pull that up while we go. No, I have not watched that, Kristen. I'm going to look that up. Maybe that'd be a future stream. That's very interesting. I've been to Joshua Tree. Very beautiful place, very beautiful night sky. But I went, and God forgive me, I went for an ayahuasca retreat, and I know that there's weird things that happen out in Joshua Tree. That's for sure. So I'm definitely going to check that out. So thank you so much, Slow Boy Whiteboard. And Bill Hicks throws in 5, says, I can't hang out any longer. Unfortunately, you're doing God's work by covering this dark topic. God bless. Well, thank you so much, Bill. Blessed Lent to you, brother. Hope you're doing well down under. So thank you very much for that. And then we had one come in over on the Dono chat. Justin Henley, shout out to my brother Justin Henley, said, before joining the Orthodox Church, I never paid children any mind. Now I've become an official uncle of the parish, but I'm always still nervous around kids and their parents because I don't want to come off as one of these horrible people. Well, I doubt you're going to come off that way. I like children. But I doubt you're going to come off, or most men are going to come off as one of these weird pervs just for enjoying children, supporting children, interacting with children. I think that's actually very healthy and normal. But thank you very much, Justin, for that support, brother. Really appreciate it. And Jack, the guitar god, throws in 5, says, hey, I found a church close to me by St. Elijah Macedonian. Oh, St. Elijah Macedonian, asking your opinion on that being a good one. Also, thank you and others for spreading orthodoxy. Well, I personally don't know that parish. Not sure where you're at in the country, but go to the church, check it out, talk with the priest, and see if it's a good community. I mean, I always tell people not to choose a parish based on the diocese or the jurisdiction. I've been to OCA and Greek parishes who kind of had the reputation of being more liberal, and they were fantastic. They had incredibly based traditional priests. So it's kind of a parish by parish thing. Go to the church, go to liturgy. I mean, we have 2 weeks leading up to Pascha right now. So it's a perfect time to go see some services, witness some services, and talk with the priest. See if it's somebody you trust. See if it's somebody you feel like could actually give you spiritual guidance. And if not, find another one. But if this one's close and this is one that you found, go check it out. My opinion on not being there, I can't give any official condemnation or recognition. So thank you very much, Jack, the guitar god. Glory to God that you're joining the church. Okay. All right. Well, let's continue on a little bit more.
Awesome that you're sitting here. Yeah, because again, I speak to many people, but everyone's experience is different. And my sense of your experience is that it was like nonstop.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you were one of those children who were born into it, and that's it. You're just surrounded by these creeps all the time, you know, and you have to befriend them, and you know, you're a child, you have attachment issues, you know, you have no choice. So that some of those slaves, from child slaves, it's like nonstop, and like you said, you know, you were used all the time. Oh, it's unbelievable that you're sitting here.
I'm very happy about it. Yeah. So, and there are also some more esoteric aspects to this that have to do with raising your spiritual vibration. So that's the other aspect of it. So it wasn't just that they couldn't use me as a trainer, although that was obviously the main practical concern. But my more sensitive handlers were also making me aware, not intentionally, but I haven't really touched on this yet, but there's a whole psychic battle that goes along with the physical battle.
Of course.
Yeah. And it just plays into how I got out. So I guess it's time to mention it. So it came to my attention essentially that my core vibration, my soul signature, was raising to a point where they couldn't harness it anymore. So I still am wondering kind of what that means in practice. I hear, you know, I talk.
This is where his kind of new age spirituality starts to come into place. So, you know, the rest of the stream, I'm going to leave you. If you guys want to dive into it more, there's actually, if you just search Alondra Markman, there's multiple interviews that he's done. This was the one that kind of went viral and got the most views. But like I said, he's got these weird spiritual new age worldviews. But in regards to vibrations, I wanted to make the point that this is actually orthodox, depending on how you perceive them. You know, thinking about positive thoughts and things that you desire is not what elevates your vibration. As Orthodox Christians, we believe it's the uncreated energies of God, that in their actual energies, and we are actual vibrations. And as you actually embody virtue and imbue virtue into the world, you do raise your vibration. But this isn't some like, oh, you know, I started thinking about happy thoughts and I started to think about this or that, and I was raising my vibration. I was radiating so hard they couldn't control me anymore. That's not how it works. It actually has to do with real, practical, embodied virtue, these uncreated energies of God. And this is how we understand the saints actually attaining the Taboric light, the uncreated light, how saints actually glow. This is a phenomenon within the Orthodox world that we know. So there is something to the idea of like raising your vibration. And if he's engaged in all this satanic ritual abuse, his, you know, the vibration would actually degrade because it's a privation of God's energies. And so the only way to overcome that is by seeking a repentance and actually embodying virtue and becoming more like Christ. So I would just want to make that point. What were you guys saying in the chat? You guys are nuts. All right. But anyways, you know, final comments. I'm going to let you guys, I'll share this link if you guys want to watch the rest of this, and I'll share the link with the rest of, Ted Gunderson's video. It's short. It's only like 10 more minutes if you guys are interested in that. But this stuff is absolutely real. And everything that we found recently with what Diddy is performing essentially an Epstein sting operation, we see the same thing. We see sex with children, we see power, we see blackmail, and these satanic ritual cults, these satanic cults are operating in our country. They're operating all over the world. And do I believe that the people at the top are a part of them? Yes, because the thing about the power that these satanic cults offer is something that money can't buy, right? You can't buy, well, I mean, you, in a way you can buy the adreno, right? You can buy children through the trafficking organizations that do this stuff, but they can't buy the soul of somebody. They can't buy the destruction, right? So there's something of power there that they can enact, that they can get these children, they can ritually destroy them. They can even off them if they want. This is like the ultimate pinnacle of satanic power, right? That you can transgress all boundaries and have no repercussions. And that's essentially the spirituality that they operate in, is that you can transgress the boundaries of sexual relations with adults and minors. You can transgress the boundary of life and death by offing people. You can blackmail people by getting involved in these things. Like they said, all these wealthy people, according to Alondra Markman, would pay to watch death matches between children. Do I think that that's possible, or people are doing that? Yeah, I absolutely believe that these people are completely sick and that they get off on this stuff. So the point of today's stream was to discuss these SRAs, because when you bring them up to normies or anybody who's very, very skeptical, who may be aware of this stuff, they'll always point out the alleged claims. And we have very, very few like proven cases of satanic ritual abuse. We have multiple cases of child sexual abuse that is allegedly tied to these things, but proven in court that somebody was operating in one of these. There's like very, very few, which makes you think, well, how the heck, if I just read what's on the internet, they're trying to tell me that if I believe in this stuff, this is part of a mass hysteria known as the satanic panic, and that much of this is just absolutely overblown. There's no such thing as these international satanic cults. There's no such thing as these international organizations for child sex trafficking. This type of that stuff doesn't exist. And this is part of a larger conspiratorial narrative about the powers that be. And they try to say this has to do with Christians trying to make an excuse for the evolving the normative morals of Western society, and that they feel like things are out of control. And so they just project Satanism onto horrendous acts that they discover in the world. Seems like it's a little bit more legitimate than that. So, I'll let you guys dive a little bit deeper into this type of topic for the next couple of weeks. Things are going to be a little bit more positive, a little bit on a brighter note moving forward. But I do appreciate everybody being here and supporting the stream. And I hope it was beneficial. I hope it was a little insightful. And like I said, the document I put together, that's going to go up on the website. So if you guys just want to see a little bit of an overview of satanic cults in America, famous cases of SRA, and you do your own research and come to your own conclusions. I'm somebody who believes that this stuff is way more normative than we actually think it is. And even though the Overton window has shifted and people being critical of this stuff and talking about it is more normal than it used to be, we'll deny these claims. Well, just like John Williams says, the West Memphis 3, there's clear evidence of a satanic abuse here, and yet it's all alleged. It's not real. Don't worry about it. David Atlas renewed his COTEL crew membership. Thank you so much, David. He says, thanks for helping us stay vigilant, DPH. God bless. And that's really the goal. Thank you so much, David. That's the goal, is for you guys not, it's easy to get complacent. We're 2 weeks from Pascha. The spiritual warfare is real, guys. The evil that is out there is absolutely real. And, we need to stay vigilant. We need to keep our eyes open, and we need to know that this stuff can happen. And if you have children, I would say, especially in today's world, you got to stay vigilant and you got to be very protective, because who knows what's going on, let alone with all the mass media and the social media. Like you cannot let your children just search the internet. There's so many stories. I was watching a video on X or something of some parent who was trying to be protective of like what their children saw, and they just let them, they didn't realize they didn't have like search settings on. They just let him have an iPad. And a few days later, they find out that they're watching like stuff that they should not be seeing. And this is on like mainstream social media stuff. And I mean, anybody who's been on X knows that you literally can see porn on X. I mean, Kanye West posted hardcore pornography on his X account. And, one of the things that I thought was really weird that I've blocked on X is I think it's like part of the algorithm. You know, they say that the algorithm is driven by like hatred or things that you dislike, disgust, and that they put that there so you'll engage with it. And I never watched this stuff, but I started to get all these X accounts that are like showing videos of people dying in strange ways. And I never even watched or engaged with this content. So I would start just blocking the accounts. I can't tell you how many I blocked, but there are massive accounts on X that just show people dying in horrific ways. And people watch this stuff. So, you know, this is a deeper darkness within our culture that people actually get off watching all that type of stuff. Enzo throws in a generous $50. Thank you so much, Enzo. It said, hey, David, first dono, love the channel. Thank you so much, brother. You, Jay, Andrew, and Jim Bob have convinced me to convert to Eastern Orthodoxy from Protestantism. Well, glory to God for that, brother. You won't regret it, I promise. First divine liturgy today. No female priest, but a woman was teaching catechumen class. Red flag. God bless. A woman teaching catechism class. I mean, technically, that's not an official position in the church. And I guess it depends on the parish. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a red flag right out of the gate. If the parish is traditional, if you talk with the priest and he's a traditional Orthodox priest, has traditional values, he's aware of what's going on in his church. And typically any catechumen teacher has to be okayed by the priest. She may just really know the faith really well. Like there is nothing in the Orthodox faith that prevents them from teaching catechism. Although it's not usual. I wouldn't say that a large swath of Orthodox churches have a woman teaching catechumen class, but if she's really, really sharp on all those topics, and maybe she's done it for a while, or maybe at one point the church needed that role and she assumed that role and she's been doing it ever since, that's not necessarily a red flag for the parish. But, you know, you could bring it up to the priest, talk about how you're converting from Protestantism and some of the things that are pushing you toward the Orthodox faith. You can mention learning more about it online. And you can mention about the rock band worship service, feminine, emotive type worship of the Protestant churches, and say, hey, you know I'm new here. This is totally outside my wheelhouse. I was just curious because I'm coming from Protestantism, and I saw that you guys had a woman catechumen teacher, and she may be fantastic. I was just curious, like, what was the role of women in the church? Because me coming from Protestantism, I was trying to avoid any of that. And I just wanted to make sure. You could ask him in a real polite way that way and see what he says. I'm sure there'd probably be a reason for that. So is it a red flag, a woman's teaching catechism? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Could it be a red flag? I guess it could be. You just have to talk with the priest. I mean, Orthodoxy is very personal. So you have to talk with the priest. You have to figure out every parish has its own personality. It has its own community. So talk with the priest, see what he says, let him know your contention with Protestantism, that you're coming here for the full historical faith, and that you saw that and it just kind of caught your eye and you'd like a little bit of clarification on that. So check that out. Justin Henley said, Father Moses' church had us catechumens watch YouTube videos during the communion / after dismissal so that we weren't sitting around doing nothing or going home. Well, that's a good point. And not all churches even kick out the catechumens during communion. I know, so depends on the parish you go to. And Josiah Elleron throws in 20. Thank you so much, Josiah. He says, thanks as always for addressing important topics. You are a holy man. Well, don't say that, God willing. I have my own shortcomings, but God willing, we can all become holy, right? That's the goal. That's the journey of theosis, is that we slowly try to become more holy. I feel uncomfortable saying that I am holy, but I do appreciate the support, Josiah. Really appreciate that. God bless you, brother. So, yeah. Let's see. Boomer Slayer says, true Masons are everywhere. Found out my boss was one by seeing his ring. yeah, Masons are everywhere. And I've met Masons that aren't, you know, just given the today's topic, they're not satanic. They're perennialists for sure. They have weird spirituality. They have a perennialist spirituality for sure. They worship a general great architect that could be the god of many different religions. So I certainly do not trust the spiritual advice of any Mason, but I've known Masons, and sometimes they're just, honestly, I've met a couple and they're only Masons. They weren't even great in understanding esoteric knowledge. Like, I think the Masonic temples, there's a lot of levels that are, you know, people are being selected for. But I met one guy and he didn't even know, like, you know, some of the great esoteric lore. And it seems like he just goes to the Masonic Lodge to drink beer and talk with other guys and sort of have a male community, which is unfortunate. That certainly is not a reason to join a Masonic Lodge. But yeah, at the high degrees, they're Luciferian. At the highest degree of Masonry, I mean, I have a whole chapter in my dissertation on Masonry. So I'm very familiar with how the Masonic lodges work and the ranking system. And I have Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike over here. I mean, you read Moral and Dogma. I mean, it's rooted within a Luciferian, perennialist, occultic worldview. That is the spiritual paradigm of Masonry. But the average Mason in my opinion, has been very underwhelming that I've met in regards to like being a great mind. We had a super chat come in over on the Dono chat. Marnie throws in $4 and says, thanks, DPH. Curious if you saw the new Cut article about ISTA. I knew a bunch of people involved in that cult when I was in the New Age psychedelic world. Very dark and relevant to today's topic. No, I did not see the new Cut article about the ISTA. What is that? Let me see. I just put in Cut article. Yeah, the International School of Temple Arts. What is, the Cut, latest news, the Cut. Here we go. What is the Cut? This looks like a lefty. What is this? So I'll show you guys what I'm looking at. So I just put in Cut article. I'll show you. I had it open on another tab. So International School of Temple Arts. And then I found Cut down here. Cut. Let's see. The Cut. I don't see the article you're referring to, Marnie. I'm not sure. So I'll see if I go to the Cut. I mean, it looks like, what is this? I mean, Lady Gaga looks satanic. I'm not seeing anything on the international. Let me, is there a search? I don't even see a search button on this website. I don't know. I'm not seeing it. So I'm sorry, Marnie, if you're still in the chat. I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to. I'm on the Cut, and I don't see anything regarding am I missing something in the chat, guys? Is somebody correcting me on where to find this thing? I'm not seeing it. So sorry, Marnie. I do not see the article. So no, I did not see the new Cut article about ISTA. If you guys have it, you can always send it to me. Church of the Eternal Logos at gmail.com. Church of the Eternal Logos. Okay, the Confessionals podcast, 512. Let me pull that up. Desert Portal.
All right, today we.
Oh my gosh, 3.5 hours long. This is a long boy. All right. All right, slow boy. I will check this out. I have not seen this. I've never even heard of the Confessionals podcast. So in episode 512, we are joined by James. He moved to Hollywood recently to help his career in the film industry as he was previously working out of Atlanta. One night, he and his friend went out to a bar where they met a guy that wanted to take them to another place to drink. Once they arrived, James's friend was so weirded out by the people he saw going that he bailed and left James alone with his new acquaintance. From there, James was talked into going to another party out in the desert in a place called Joshua Tree. Outside, I've been there. James wound up spending over 24 hours at this location where he saw out of this world things. There were vampires, cloaked figures around pentagrams, flying people, and portals opening up, and it all seemed to be geared toward the guest of honor, James himself. As the danger rose, James found himself running for his life through the desert to escape these people that seemed to be grooming him to be a sacrifice that night in the desert. This was one of the wildest stories we have ever heard on the Confessionals, and James tells us a riveting story that could be chalked up as a tale by many, but he comes with the receipts that point that this event actually happened to him. Wow. All right. I'm going to check this out, slow boy. I'm going to share that link if you guys want to see that. So there's the link for anybody in the chat who wants to watch this themselves. I'll watch this another night. That sounds actually very fascinating and connects with psychedelics and all types of stuff. So that's going to have to be a future stream for sure. I'll check that out. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for tonight's stream. Smash that like. Thank you all for being here. I greatly appreciate your guys' support. And let me just double check, make sure nobody sent anything in on Dono Chat or Streamlabs. Smash that like, and I will be back Tuesday with another stream. Might be one of the sponsored streams. I got to get down to the nitty gritty and do some research for the various sponsored streams we got lined up. So either way, whatever the topic is going to be, I'm going to be back Tuesday. I'll be going to Pre-Sanctified Liturgy Wednesday, which we all should. So it won't be streaming Wednesday, but Thursday and Friday, I plan on having more streams. So Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we have a week jam-packed with some new streams and new topics. So looking forward to that. All right. I will catch you all then Tuesday. So as always, until next time, God bless.